of No Direction, the No Direction Network's Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. I'm Ryan Costello.
And I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param.
We are here to talk about PaizoCon, but it is not the first thing we're going to be talking about. It would be wrong of us not to address the current situation of the world, specifically the protests in the United States. If we didn't talk about it, it would still be reflected in how we are talking about PaizoCon, because just about as soon as we were done PaizoCon and we kind of let that out of all of our systems, we all really absorbed what was going on, and it affected us all deeply. And so we're just going to take a couple of minutes to do more than just acknowledge it. We are going to be really addressing that this has affected us, the two of us personally as hosts. It has affected the members of the network. It has affected our fan base. It should be affecting you. Baram, how are you holding it? Actually, what is Kentucky like?
Kentucky is like mostly immune to this right now because we don't have a whole lot of integrated populations around here. There's not a lot of. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of diversity in Eastern Kentucky. There's a enjoyable amount, and thankfully we don't have the worst of the worst problems that have unfortunately become more and more prevalent. Though in Western Kentucky we have had 2 suspicious officer-involved shootings during the protest. Our governor is extremely angry about that for good reason. They lost the body cam footage all of a sudden, for example. Yeah, some fun stuff. It's gotten so bad that even here in Eastern Kentucky, they are putting protests together, and that never happens in Eastern Kentucky. Wow. Like tiny little towns are throwing BLM protests here, and that never happens. As an American, I am frightened, I am angry, I am enraged, I am confused, I am absolutely devastated, and my heart goes out to those who are being continually horribly subjected to unfair and absolutely abhorrent conditions that have justified such a massive show of outrage.
Well, unlike Kentucky, Montreal is extremely diverse, but unlike what you may think of Canada, we also have a lot of institutionalized racism, a history of mistreating largely our Indigenous people, although there is also systemic racism against Black people as well. And lately, especially in Quebec, there's been a large push of Islamophobia, including an absurd amount of completely backwards laws that are pretending they are anything but Islamophobic. And our premier, which is like our governor, I guess, I don't know what the equivalent is, but premier is the guy in charge of Quebec, and he recently made a statement that Quebec does not have any kind of institutionalized racism problem, and that was just wrong. It's absolutely not correct. So we are protesting, but it is not at the same magnitude. It is not the same fever pitch of what the United States is currently experiencing. And if anything, we had better use this as our cue to implement some really important changes, because it is stupid and unforgivable that this is still the state of the world, and it has been people staying quiet and being polite and not trying to get political, and that has long been one of our stances, and that has gone on for too long, and it has caused the problem to continue. So we will not be part of the problem anymore. We are doing everything we can to get the word out that Black Lives Matter, that we completely support it, that we blame the government. I am not happy with Donald Trump. He is one of the worst people in the world. And if you think otherwise, I am baffled, because I do not know how anyone could come to a logical conclusion other than seeing him as a major problem.
Yeah, and we're putting our money where our mouth is. We talked about this. So the money that we've raised this month is going to be going to some various charities to support the families and the efforts. We're still coordinating exactly where that is, but the network's money that we've raised this month is going in that direction.
Did you want to do May or do you want to do the June money? Anyway, it doesn't matter. This is a very
it's
small
details.
We'll work it out. Yeah, exactly. It will probably be about the same amount either month.
Yeah.
So, with that, are you ready to start the show?
I am.
Well then, I'm Ryan Costello Jr.
And I'm just
Junior. Wow.
Yeah, callback nostalgia time. I've been having a huge nostalgia trip too, actually.
I did not tell Paizo that I am not going by Junior anymore, and it's been so long since I got a Paizo credit that my Paizo credit in the Lost Omens Legends that's coming out still has the Junior on it.
So why did you stop going by Junior? I remember it happened all of a sudden, and I kind of didn't quite understand why.
So my dad's name is Martin.
Mm-hmm.
I was never a junior. In high school, I took boxercise along with my brother, and my coach, Oliver, nicknamed me Junior because I was the youngest in the class and I was the younger of the two Costellos. And Oliver committed suicide not long after we were doing the lessons, and it always affected me, and just taking on the Junior as part of my pen name was just kind of a nod to him because it was a very it was like my earliest experience with a more personal death. And I took it on for several years, but then I don't even remember specifically why I dropped it. I think it was about now I had my own kids and my family, and I was actually starting to get credit, and it was just kind of confusing. So yeah, that was just something I eventually dropped. It's still at some people may still remember me more as a junior than anything, but that is the story, and I don't think I've ever gone into it on the air, which surprises me because we've talked about it a lot.
Mm-hmm. Oh boy! So speaking of nostalgia and things being suddenly changed for reasons that we'd rather they not have changed, PaizoCon happened. PaizoCon Online 2020. And I very much know PaizoCon happened. You know PaizoCon happened because I think we're still recovering.
I think yesterday was a day of recovery for me. It was a big one of getting a lot of stuff out of my system and just kind of like being kicked out of PaizoCon mode. It honestly, on Monday when I was writing the Recall Knowledge, which is the blog that I put up of just recapping what's been going on at the network and previewing what's coming up the next week. And it was like, PaizoCon ended yesterday. Like, it's been less than 24 hours since we did the closing ceremony, and it feels so long ago.
Oh.
So we've got some people in chat kick the table saying it was their first PaizoCon, and yeah, that's cool. And that was one of my first impressions of it, just how many people were getting to experience some kind of PaizoCon.
I mean, it broke records. We got them telling us like this is more people games played than Gen Con. Like,
yeah, it was over 1,000 tables ran. I remember on Saturday night, some people were coming in and reporting, "Hey, I just reported game number 909. Do you think we're going to break the 3 digits? Are we going to make over 1,000 tables?" And that was something that they officially did. We had our part in PaizoCon, but PaizoCon was not our thing, so right. I got to be careful not to call it ours. Yeah, they did it. They broke over 1,000 tables. It seemed like people were constantly talking about the games they were in when we were in the bar section of the PaizoCon Discord, which was a much bigger part of PaizoCon than I realized it would be. I think I only first heard about it when we had Tanya on the show. And she brought it up, and I thought it was cool, and then I joined it, and I didn't realize you were supposed to do a special code to get access to all the channels. And so when I first joined, I was like, oh, okay, there's about a dozen channels here. One of them's ours to coordinate some things. All right. And then I clicked the whatever we were supposed to do, exclamation point attendee, whatever it was to unlock everything. And then I saw just how massive the Discord they had put together was.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, I kind of regretted hitting that because it was real easy to get to our channel. And then when you did that, it was like, oh my gosh, there's hundreds of channels. and trying to get down to the bottom where our coordinated channel was a bit of a chore. But oh my gosh, there was so much cool stuff going on in there. And bar chat felt just like I was hanging out on the big old couch in the bar with a drunk thirsty next to me, and it was wonderful.
Yeah, Paizo people were just popping in, starting conversations. There was no like fawning over them like you might expect at a convention that's all about making the Paizo staff look like rock stars. They just came in like they were any other attendee. They joined in the conversations. People engaged with them. It was cool. It was casual. It was exactly the tone that I like about PaizoCon.
Yeah, and I am super glad that it got put together. That there was still something to bring the community together for that week. I'm glad that we got to take such a prominent part of it, and that it was in most ways an overwhelming success.
I cannot think of a way that it didn't meet expectations. I know one of our last post panel conversations was with Adam Daigle, and he was saying like, oh, he does miss seeing people's faces and interacting with people in person. And it is true; it is a different experience. And around when we were having that conversation, Facebook Memories was showing like, hey, remember what you were doing this time last year and the year before and the year before that? And it was like, I am starting to see the differences, but considering a month ago, it was like, there's not going to be a PaizoCon. Even before they announced it, we're like, there can't be. We're wondering if there's going to be a San Diego Comic Con or Gen Con. There's not going to be a PaizoCon. It's in May.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was canceled. And what we got was more than just making up for it. It was a whole new experience and a whole different version of PaizoCon that was still very much not just an online convention. It was an online PaizoCon.
And Shadows over Scotland brings up a very important point. It was really lovely to see the online venture officers coming to the fore and helping make this happen. And oh my gosh, were they superheroes! Like all the volunteers were awesome, but and I am an officer, currently an officer displaced from a community, but when they when we needed advice and we needed expertise, the online venture officers who have been doing this for years, they had the answers. They had the tutorials, they helped get stuff together, they helped make sure that we had a good direction to go in. And when I say we, it's because I am also part of the officer crew, even though my duties for PaizoCon were entirely directed otherwise for this, but at least got to see the background chatter and what was being organized. And they were on it. And the online games could not have happened anywhere as quickly or smoothly, and definitely not in as good a numbers, if the online venture officers were not already established and really good at what they do.
Yeah, we had Jesse Davis on 4 episodes ago when we did the quarantined gaming. And he was talking about how online has become a thing, like as a territory, because it was a fight. It was something that a lot of people were interested in. And the idea required a lot more logistics than implementing any other new territory. And so it took the venture officers convincing the organized play organizers, the organized play staff, showing them how it could be done, showing them the advantages, showing them exactly they became experts in the area before it ever launched. And so then it launched, and it's just grown since then. And now, out of necessity, it's become the main way that we game. And thank goodness that was already in place leading up to PaizoCon online, because otherwise it would not have had a gaming component.
Yeah, and this is the one thing I'm going to say critical about Paizo's online efforts is that I hope that this has put a very bright spotlight on the ways in which the Paizo organized play reporting system is absolutely not designed to handle online gaming, and get some serious love and attention to make that aspect of the community, which is just going to become more and more and more important now that online is part of our lives, but also now that a whole bunch of us have had to engage with it for long periods of time, and are noticing like the little failings of the organized play program that still has paper and stamps and ink as a presumption, and that needs to. I shouldn't have to open up Photoshop just to get sheets to my players.
Lava Being in the chat is saying that some of the players at their table got a lot of help setting up to play both Starfinder Society and Roll20, neither of which they were familiar with. So yeah, that is something that I projected on the first day of PaizoCon when we had that really long segment after the Welcome to PaizoCon panel. And I was saying that you can expect these online conventions that are replacing the physical conventions to continue. They might not replace physical conventions anymore. They are going to subsidize them, but people are going to be experts. People are going to continue to become better at Roll20 and other virtual tabletops. And this is not a weird thing anymore, that like the barrier of entry is lowered out of necessity.
Yeah, and it is also proving like the unique strengths of the platform, where you can do things like have sound and cool animations and all sorts of fun things ready to go. Gosh, I played with Roll for Combat just a little bit ago, and the reason I'm bringing it up is that Steve is really, really good at Roll20. And he had my, like, I gave him my character stat block, and he had my entire character ready to go for the game, to where it was almost like playing a video game. I was just able to click on my character and then tell it to roll any of my skills, any of my attacks, any of my special abilities. I did not need to open my core rulebook or archive of Nessus throughout the entirety of that game, and that is something that you can't do with the physical play space, not easily at least.
Well, think about gaming at a con. Think about yelling over the table next to you that then has to yell over you. It becomes like an arms race of who can yell louder to be heard, until finally one of the tables just accepts that let's just finish things up because that table next to us is too loud.
I was able to do accents for my characters that wasn't my my Master Sergeant voice, which is the one I have to go to at conventions when I'm doing a big room. Is like suddenly Ambrose Valson is a blasted army sergeant.
Oh, this is interesting. Lava Being says they also had 2 players lose internet about
no.
4 hours into an organized play session, but they could still play through Discord audio alone despite not being able to see Roll20.
We have done that for an actual play recording once, so that's a neat thing that to be able to do. I don't know that many of you know this, but Crystal actually handled the last part of the fighting against that darn heart monster through her cell phone on Discord, while Roll20 and her computer absolutely crashed out. And still, we were able to finish the adventure. It was still a satisfying experience, and I really, really felt sorry for her having to do all
that. Kick the Table had a great line when you were talking about how good Stephen is at Roll20. They said that he goes to Roll21.
Awesome. Oh, I guess I better. This would normally be a shout out, but since I brought it up, I'll be guesting on one of Roll for Combat's Tales from the Black Lodge coming up whenever that one gets released. I'm not really sure the schedule for those or how long in advance that those are recorded.
So, according to the schedule, I was talking news first, and then we would talk about our PaizoCon Online experience. But I think at this point, let's just cover all of our personal things with PaizoCon Online, including our history of it, because someone in our Discord had asked for some insight into how it went for us on multiple levels. Like they also want to know how we managed to do everything. So I'm trying to find the exact quote and also the exact person, but it's not coming to me because I'm not entirely sure what channel it was in. Oh, maybe the convention one. So, Param, how about you start with just some of the basics of what you managed to accomplish as the head of this year's KD Con team?
All right, so we managed to record and stream the majority of the 49 plus hours of content that got streamed during PaizoCon. And usually when we say something like 49 hours of content for a PaizoCon, that means like 12 hours of featured stuff that we have video for, and then a whole bunch of tape recorders. Now, this is all on video, y'all. You can go check this stuff out right now on Paizo's Twitch channel. This is going to be releasing on Paizo's YouTube channel, and it's going to be releasing audio on our con stream, you know, any day now. And so, like, it's all there. and it was a bear to get put together, but it was so worth it. I've never seen our team step up to the extent that they had to step up this time. They were moving so professionally and so quickly. There was an incident on one of the days where like the internet went out for most of Kentucky and all of West Virginia for about a 20-minute time period because one of the ISPs lost their backbone connection, which means there ain't nothing I can do. But we had contingency in place after contingency in place, and V was just like on that, like grease on a hog, and it was done and ready to go. And it was up, and then there were some issues, of course, when you have any sort of massive transition like that. But the content kept going after a very brief interruption, and then when I was able to reestablish, we very quickly transitioned that back over to my control, and we were able to finish out that panel, and then the rest of the day of seminars without issue. I have never been
And
more
Lava
proud of
Being
my team.
Lava Being is asking if some of the other seminars were recorded. So in the planning, we were given a schedule of what Paizo was doing and the ones that would be streaming on Paizo's Twitch channel, which we were getting the keys for, and we were being told to, we had full responsibility for most of the time. There wasn't even a Paizo staff on the streaming and wrangling side. It was all KD staff. And then shortly before PaizoCon online went live, there was a post about the other panels that were going to be there, the ones that were going to be in the Discord chat. And I was like, I didn't even know about these. And by then we'd put together the team, we'd made the schedule, and we had no plan for that. And we had no time to risk multitasking our team or figuring out a way and getting new contracts with Paizo, because this was paid work, because Paizo can't have volunteers. It's a for-profit company. So just logistically, we were like, oh, that's a real shame, because some of those look really interesting, and some of those are some of my favorite panels from every single PaizoCon. They're the ones that are put on by third-party publishers, or like the Freelance Forge. They have like a good freelancing panel on how to break into RPG and stuff. Wayfinder had a panel. So we missed most of them, I will admit. But Randall, who was not on the KD Con team this year, but has been in the past, basically did what he does at a PaizoCon. He went in, he got permission, and he recorded the seminars. So it wasn't as a Paizo staffer, it was just as a fan recording and then contributing to the network. And he just happens to be a member of the network. Just for, legal logistics, that has to be how we look at it. But yeah, Randall stepped up. He got some extra recordings that we didn't have a plan for, and I just assumed we were not getting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also, and also some of the panels themselves reached out to us and coordinated with Randall and some with Dustin to get some of that. And I'm really glad that the community is sort of recognized. This is the second time that I've seen this happen, that like, oh, we need to get this out. Let's make sure KD knows that we have content. We're very, very appreciative of that, especially in this situation. As well, we're getting from chat that Find the Path, an excellent podcast out there that you all should definitely check out. Their mummy's mask was fantastic. They did a seminar on the game, and they have their seminar ready to go on their YouTube channel. So I imagine some of the panelists have made their own arrangements, especially the panelists that are also podcasters and know the importance of things like that. I'm going to try my best to find what I can and include some of that into like some links, and when we put up our con page coverage of, hey, here's some other efforts that were put on outside of us, and where you can go to get the full con experience. But more so than any other PaizoCon, a lot of the experience can be rewound and experienced now or off schedule, or what do we call that? Time shifted is the industry term for that. So if you are just now thinking, oh, there was a PaizoCon, which probably not, but if maybe you're just tuning into us for the first time, in which case, awesome, great to have even more fantastic people in this community. But if you missed, just about any of the panels, Uh, all the AMAs I know are being archived, so you can go read them, and some other great content in a lot more ways than one. You can experience it, and if you experience it through like the Twitch VODs, even you'll see the chat scroll by as it's happening, and you'll get to feel that hype again as people are just like excited and the at the announcements and throwing in questions. But do not try to add your own questions because those messages will go through now, and then you're going to
Well,
get some.
I usually don't get the message box until I'm done watching an archived video.
I guess I just use so many different services, and they handle that so differently that I missed that. But
So
I have totally left messages on pages when I tried to chat with an audience that was not there anymore.
now you mentioned hype, and I do want to point out Darren Caldemeyer is in chat, and he's saying tentatively 359 days until PaizoCon.
Oh wow!
I want to give a big shout out to Darren Caldemeyer because the lead up to PaizoCon, he makes it happen. He's the one that provides all the images. He makes sure everything is on time. He does the calculations. He keeps us up to date throughout the year of how many days are coming until PaizoCon.
Mm-hmm.
And when PaizoCon online was announced after PaizoCon offline was canceled, and those images started coming in almost right away, it was like, this is real. It wasn't real until Darren Caldemeyer started counting down to PaizoCon online, and it was fun. It was fun to get that part of PaizoCon back and just to get the same excited build up to PaizoCon the day itself.
It was so quick that if we had not been already integrally involved in that happening and in all those meetings and in making it happen with Peyton and Aaron and Jim and the rest of the Paizo crew, and that might have been how I found out. It was just, oh, here's the email from Darren. Oh, I guess we're doing it online.
So Darren Goldblatter does also ask, he couldn't find the AMA. So I wonder if it was the same situation as before you hit the exclamation point attendee, you get a much truncated version of the PaizoCon Discord channel, because Darren, it would be hard to miss them. There was just a big chunk as you scroll down of AMA, this Paizo staffer, and there was 2-3 dozen of them. So they have been archived. I've got a link to it. I was hoping but doubted that I'd be able to read through that all, just in case there were any additional announcements that were kind of stealth snuck in there. I did not get to them, and I was not keeping up with the AMAs during the con, unfortunately. Although I did take advantage of it to ask Ron Lundin a question that I always felt, even though he's a member of the network now, I felt weird asking him because it was a 100% work-related question, and it was just, there was some lore in the background of Extinction Curse, and I was like, this makes a certain NPC come off like a jerk. Is he supposed to come off like a jerk? And Ron confirmed, yeah, you know what? Sometimes that NPC is a jerk. So I was happy to get the answer to that question. And I am curious what other people were asking, because I know Adam Daigle was saying that it was not the super specific, really like stress-inducing minutia questions that he was worried about.
Elfdroff is saying that a fan compiled all the AMA questions into a Google Doc.
Yeah.
Elfdroff, can you totally, email us those links if you can find it, so that we can help point people at that fun resources. Also, Paizo PR's in chat. I don't know if you're Aaron, Jim, or Peyton, but welcome.
Could it be Alex?
Oh, it might be Alex.
So that link is on our Discord somewhere. That's how I was able to hopefully catch up on the AMAs. I wasn't going back into the PaizoCon server, and I'm just trying to find that link now.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of stealth announcements, there were some very non-stealth announcements made at PaizoCon.
Well, before we get to those, though, I did finally find that question. It was in our patron chat. It's from Shadows Over Scotland, who's even in our Discord right now. Or sorry, he's in our Twitch chat right now. So I'm surprised he didn't catch on that we were talking about this one. But he was interested to hear about the stress and strain things that ended up being versus an in-person con for the folks behind the scenes. And I definitely have a long story about that, which I'm happy to go into. But I'm curious if you wanted to tackle that one first.
Well, before I am outed for the amount of stress that has happened, there was a Herculean effort made by all parties involved to get this to go off as it did. And that began probably a month before people even knew it was happening, when we were already engaging and working. First, Ryan, you took the initiative straight off when it was just, what if they cancel PaizoCon? You immediately began efforts for organizing and planning what an online convention would look like. If maybe it would be just us doing it. We hoped that we could work with Paizo. And then, of course, as things became more official, that work became even more work and more official work. And I know towards like a month in, I would be like up nights, like making plans and putting resources together and testing things. And it'd be like 3 a.m. and then I'd go over and I'd see, oh, Peyton's still up. Peyton's doing the same thing I'm doing. Okay. And we didn't work together during those 3 a.m.s, but it definitely was helpful to know that I was not not anywhere near the only one putting in the long hours to make it happen. Plus, our team was wonderful. As far as stress, incredible amounts of stress. I don't think I've ever been more stressed out in my entire life than the amount of stress that went into making this happen.
So, me taking the initiative was actually, I had been thinking about doing an online convention since before coronavirus. I actually was like, I'm turning 40 this year. And I was like, how do I want to celebrate my 40th birthday? It would be cool if I could do something with the entire Katie staff. And there is no way I could trust them all to get passports and come to Canada. And it would be asking my family a lot for all of us to go to some central location. It would be asking Tina a lot to just stay home with the girls while I go celebrate my birthday. Plus, I wouldn't want to do that. So I was like, an online hangout of me and the entire Katie staff would be cool. And why would we limit that to just us? We could probably turn this into some kind of event. KatieCon has been an idea we've kicked around for a couple of years now. And so it was really just like gears were already turning. And then it was like, PaizoCon might be canceled. Listen, y'all, what can we do about this? And Paizo PR is saying that they said, pretty much told the bosses that Katie was going to do it if we did not, which might be why Eric Mona made it sound like a threat when he was describing what we did. But the exact email I sent was like, hey, we've got this idea. We don't know if you also have this idea. We definitely don't want to compete with you. And we would be happy to help you if you have the same idea. Not a threat.
No.
An olive branch.
Yeah.
Olive branch carved to a point.
Oh yeah. It's like we were super emphasis on, if Paizo does this, we want to help, not compete with them.
Right, because our version of PaizoCon had Paizo staff guesting, and because it was like, I bet they have announcements that they want out in May, and so we would be happy to be the platform for them to do those announcements.
Yeah.
But again, if Paizo is doing it, we are not competing with them for that time and space.
And just to give y'all some background, we were already in meetings negotiating, the details for us officially hosting it in person, like we did last year and did Gen Con the last couple of years. I mean, that's something we very much enjoyed, very much was good for the network, good for the community, and we had every intention of doing it again. So like I took meetings with Jim and Peyton and Aaron already, just like, assuming it's happening in person and here's what we're doing. And then all of a sudden it didn't. So.
Right. Because not only did coronavirus happen, coronavirus started in Seattle.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't just like, maybe the con's going to be canceled. It's like, are we going to fly into ground zero of this super contagious disease? And so Paizo was kind of dragging their heels about making it official that we would be on board for a physical one. And we assumed it was because they didn't know if PaizoCon would happen because there was such a threat of it being canceled. And while I was like, it would be nice to have that answer, at the same time, I was like, I'm kind of okay with them dragging their heels because I don't know if I can commit to going and potentially bringing an infectious disease back to my home and my family and my country.
Yeah, and I do not want to, I kind of want to steer the dragging their heels comment away from being a pejorative here. to cancel a convention is such a massive thing with a lot of financial liability and insurance considerations. It's the sort of thing that can bankrupt companies if handled poorly. So these things had to be handled with absolute delicate precision. So if you're noticing like, hey, my favorite con hasn't canceled yet, or why haven't they canceled, or why did they wait so late? It's because mainly insurance. Insurance has to, if you do not want to be somebody who is liable to pay thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for something that will not happen and you will not recoup. And for small businesses and small con efforts that are a lot of the basis for most gaming cons, that is enough to kill an organization and make sure that that con never happens again, ever. So I
Yeah,
very
it's
much,
also down payments on
yeah,
locations, and it's basically if they are told they cannot have it, then
mm-hmm,
they are not defaulting on their contract.
right.
If they choose to not have it, even if it's like obviously this is going to
Mm-hmm.
be canceled, so we might as well just announce it. No, you might as well not announce it until
No,
you are told you have to announce
yeah,
it,
and
because
like,
otherwise you are
oh
liable.
boy, yeah, and it's so Paizo, of the people of the companies I know of reacting to the coronavirus changes, I respect Paizo's efforts immensely because they had staff working from home before most people I know had staff working from home. They avoided furloughs as much as possible, to an extent that even I was surprised. They had their warehouse back up before many warehouses, and getting product back out the door to the customers. They seem to be taking this as serious as a heart attack and making all the responsible choices throughout all of this, at least from my perspective, working very closely with them behind the scenes and being very close friends with a lot of them. I I have a lot of respect for how their management managed to handle this situation.
Yeah, I really appreciated how transparent they were with that sale, where they were like, "Look, we've lost Amazon, we've lost local gaming stores, we've lost our revenue streams. Please buy things so that we don't have to fire people. Not like please buy things so that we don't go out of business or we have to stop publishing." The people that the message was about were the people that worked for Paizo, and that was a great way to
Mhm.
look at it. And I'm glad they were honest about that.
And gaming companies aren't out of the woods yet. Like this is a humongous hit to financials of a gaming company right when they're supposed to be hitting their busiest, most profitable periods. The summer con season is like the Super Bowl for your average gaming convention. Like the only thing that is even more important is Christmas because Christmas is important to all retailers, or the Christmas season um, uh, is important to all retailers because you make a whole bunch of money. But like the hype, the excitement, everything about that makes customers ready to go pre-order and bother their gaming store happens during con season. And if con season doesn't happen, if the hype doesn't get out there, people don't go bothering to ask their game stores. Game stores don't order or pre-order products. Therefore, product doesn't get printed or doesn't get printed at the numbers it needs to. And right now, cons aren't happening, so the hype it has to be moved online. We hope we did our part to help with that for at least PaizoCon. But this is not as fun as it is. It's not the experience of being with thousands of other gamers, like ready to go and the adrenaline going a million miles an hour. And your gaming stores were closed. Some of them still are. Going out in public anyway is still a situation that has to be navigated carefully. And the entire production chain shut down. Like gaming stores themselves are having trouble because they lost access to everything. Like I noticed that my local comic book store just got their first shipment of Marvel comics, one of the most important products that you can have as a comic book store, in 3 months yesterday.
This reminds me of a YouTube channel I want to shout out to at the end. So when we get to the shout outs, kindly remind me. Remember that YouTube channel you wanted to shout out to? So I mentioned that I had a pretty big story about the stress of PaizoCon, and that is because so Tina, my wife, is a chemist, and she has actually been working from home before the quarantine because her lab experience means that she is uniquely qualified to validate software for scientists. She knows what scientists need. She knows how scientists will work with it, and so that has been the job that she's been doing for the last little while. But now her company has actually gotten coronavirus test contracts. They're getting contracts from hospitals and whatnot, and so they brought her into the lab because if you have a chance to get Tina on your team, you want Tina on your team for absolutely anything. And I'm not exaggerating. Tina has a credit on the Internet Movie Database because she helped me produce and she catered for a short film of mine. Tina is absolutely unbelievable and capable of doing anything. And so they brought her in. It was like all of the company's directors and Tina were sitting in on these meetings about how they were going to handle these samples when they finally came in. And like, this was a very slow negotiation because it's contracts and it's safety, and there was just a lot of logistics, and it was brand new infrastructure for how these things were going to be handled. So we knew it was coming, that she was going to start doing these long days and that she would be involved in coronavirus tests. And it ended up starting on the Tuesday of PaizoCon. So that day, Tina worked 14 hours, and this was the first of 3 14-hour days she worked in a row. She left at 9. She got home at midnight. And so for a couple of those days, I did have access to our essential workers daycare. So I wasn't alone with the girls. I was able to do some PaizoCon appearances, but I basically went from being our wrangler to being a backup wrangler and essentially an on-air personality. I did none of the wrangling because Dustin and John managed to do all of the wrangling, and Alex. They were our primary wranglers. And what the wranglers were doing is that the reason that there was very little time between, like, a panel would end, then our between panel segment would go on, and the next panel would begin. And that's because the wrangler was the one making sure that everyone was ready to go, so that when our between panel segment was done, the next one could start right away. Otherwise, it would have been like a half hour of dead air.
Yeah.
And it would have probably started with a lot of sound tests and awkwardness.
And just to give, I want to put that in context. When we have 1 or 2 guests on the show, we start the pre-show a half an hour before we go live. And you'll notice that sometimes we're still late. And that's because getting other people that do not do podcasts all the time and do not have professional setup and equipments ready to go to appear on the show, and getting their audio working, getting their video fixed, making sure that all the levels are balanced. And you're dealing with people who have varying level of technical expertise and may or may not have ever even opened the configuration windows you're trying to tell them to open before in their lives, is not an easy thing to do. And every single panel had between 3 to 5 Paizo crew doing it from their homes on those very setups that we're used to dealing with. And all of the Paizo crew were absolutely troopers. Peyton was a superhero getting that done in advance. But if we were to have to do all of that as we normally do, there would literally be like 30 minutes of dead air every single panel. And that would have made a real miserable convention to try to watch live. And so we organized the wrangling position to make that happen. And those wranglers saved my bacon. We were talking about like on-air personalities and what jobs were important. And I had to stress real early on, because I think people didn't understand how important the wrangling position was. It was like, I need wranglers more than I need a backup streamer. Like, this is the most important job to make this happen. And this con will not happen if we do not have a stable staff of excellent wranglers to get all that tech work done before and between panels.
So Kick the Table suggests the name Skitter Wranglers, and I love that.
Oh, yes. Absolutely, because they were so helpful and made so many new friends.
And also, you didn't even mention that we could have been pushing Discord to the limit. We had no idea what Discord was the only part of the plan we had no control over. We had no backup for. Mm-hmm. It was 100% on this platform being able to handle that amount of traffic for a brand new channel.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. And then also the day before, Discord goes completely offline, literal moments before we were supposed to record a show. But do not worry. we didn't just rely blindly on Discord. I tried out Zoom. I researched Skype for this. I looked into like dozens of other options. I even pulled up Ventrilo and other like old school like WoW streaming options from back in the day to see what was the most stable and best platform. And as bad as Discord was getting, it was still the answer to the problem because everything else was doing worse.
Dungeon Novices surprised Ventrilo was still a thing.
I mean, it's semi-open source software that you can host yourself. Those sorts of things never die. Actually, ICQ still works, and
Oh my goodness!
oh my gosh! And I found my old number, so I even logged into that account. Wow. I was like, oh wow.
I loved ICQ. Yeah. So to complete my story, the Friday was one of the days I did not have daycare, so it was me doing some duties on screen while trying to manage the girls, and I rented a movie for them that Scarlett's been hoping to watch in a while, and I was just hoping that would entertain them enough in between, because when I wasn't on panel, I was doing my day job. I did not take vacation days for PaizoCon this year. And yeah, at one point, Scarlett comes downstairs crying because Abigail washed her iPad. And it's been sitting in a bag of rice since today. And finally, the charger is finally dry enough that we could charge the iPad. But like, one point I went upstairs, the fridge and freezer were open. Oh, this is when we were running the game, and Scarlett came downstairs saying Abby was covered in yogurt. And so no, Abby had a little bit of yogurt on her. The floor was covered in yogurt, and it's like, I could clean that up later. If I don't clean up Abigail covered in yogurt, then that's a real problem. But she just had a regular amount of yogurt on her, so that wasn't enough to cancel the game the first time.
I also noticed that like it wasn't planned and not ideal, but I was almost kind of glad about some of the guest appearances we had from the girls during during the show, and the audience seemed to enjoy it too, because it would break out into like a stream of Twitch chat ahs, just would scroll up the screen the second Scarlett would come up and want to say hi to Param and the other people on the stream, and I don't think she realized that there were hundreds and hundreds of fans also watching at the time.
No, but I have commented, like, I don't know if the girls realize that podcast does not play as big a life in the lives of other parents, as big a part in the lives of other parents. But like, I was a little bit torn about letting them on or whether I should have just gone dark. But like, our fans have watched Scarlett grow up in these little cameos, and now Abigail is starting to make her cameos. So they've never been super disruptive, and it's usually been just bringing a positive energy to the episode to say a couple of hellos before saying goodbye. So I let it happen, and I'm glad that they got a good reaction from the crowds.
Paizo PR is saying, if we did Gen Con the same as PaizoCon, would we change any software? I do not know the answer to that, because there are several software needs that I would very much like to change. It's whether or not I've been able to find and research better alternatives out there. There's this multicam software I really want to use that would at least make part of that easier this year. But and I really, really, really need to figure out a software that will interface Elgato with Voicemeeter Banana. But we did the research before we kicked this off, and I really mean dozens and dozens of hours of research and testing before you even saw the first frame of stream. And we went with the best options that were out there at the time, and I will continue to look for better options going forward. But I'll let you know if I find it better, and if you got better, please let us know.
Yeah, that laugh, by the way, was not at anything you said. It was that Dungeon Novice said 100% of PaizoCon onlines have included kids and pet appearances.
Wonderful.
It's tradition now. Ads kick the table.
I'm so pretty sure 100% of PaizoCons have included kids.
Yeah, probably. And pets. I've seen dogs. Everyone usually brings his bug.
Yeah, I don't know about the doggies, but, you know.
They're... one of the other things is that by Gen Con, there will have been other online gaming conventions that we can look to and see if maybe they used other softwares and we can learn from. But in the planning phases of PaizoCon Online, we were hearing about a couple of online conventions, but nothing of the scope that we were going to attempt. So I think we were kind of the guinea pig for a lot of other online conventions going forward.
Yeah, there was a horror convention that was kind of big that hit before we did, but they were using a lot of the same things I was using, so I didn't really get a lot of tips from that. And also, like, yeah, for a gaming convention, we were really one of the biggest and first to try this pivot. There have been online conventions before, but I mean, we were one of the first physical conventions having to pivot into an online convention because the date for PaizoCon was so close when the coronavirus cancellations had to happen. Like, it was a very rapid movement. And we said this on the stream before, but I really need to stress it, that it kept growing in scope in good ways, but very rapidly. Like, the very first meeting we had for PaizoCon online, me and Peyton were laughing at the idea that we could ever possibly also have game tables. Like, yeah, this would be great. Like, are we going to even try game tables? And Peyton's like, that would be insane. And I'm like, yeah, that would be crazy. And then the next meeting, so they've got hundreds of tables. And I'm like, what? Great. But we just said that was going to be impossible. And they did it.
Oh man, I was going to say something. It was really good too. Well, I can do another anecdote of stress. So so when Tanya was on the podcast, we discovered a lot of what was happening with PaizoCon first time in real time. So our reactions to things that were going to be included in PaizoCon was sincere. That they had found ways to do things, and we were learning about them in real time, and we were learning about them in blog posts about it. Like, we were up to date about what we were doing and about those live stream seminars as PaizoCon grew around us.
Yeah, and if you notice that my input on the podcast about what was going on in news reactions kind of vignetted a little bit about a month and a half ago, it's because I lived, eat, and breathed PaizoCon online since about mid-March until day before yesterday.
Paizo PR in chat is saying other online conventions were watching. Lisa got texts. That's exciting.
Oh, I hope those were good texts. Because, they as awesome as it went, like as any artist, I always notice the mistakes. And so I see all the little goofs that happened and all the little technical hiccups that happened, and they each one make me cringe. But I hope everybody enjoyed it.
Wow, you said technical gaffes and you lagged, and it looks like the stream didn't lose you. But it was almost like you were tempting the online gods.
Or I had a button ready.
Oh. Clever pair. Is there anything else you want to talk about the experience? Actually, oh, no, I got an idea. Neither of us got a game during PaizoCon proper. We managed to get a couple of hours of game that we had to call short after the closing ceremonies. Is it possible to have a PaizoCon online experience where Katie is the one running the streams and you and I get to game? Forget me. I could game. Yeah.
Like, gosh. It was like 72 straight hours of work to make Gen Con happen that first time. I was... Mm-hmm. There was this version of PaizoCon Online that was like, yeah, I'm going to be busy till Friday, and then I got to hop back up for a short thing on Sunday. But I've got all of Saturday off. I'm going to go get like 3 PFS sessions in, and I'm gonna let my PFS character level up a bit, and that turned around, and I realized that I can't hold my hand straight anymore, and I can hear my heartbeat through my nose. So I need sleep now. And Saturday disappeared. Saturday was like literally like 18 hours of sleep.
Good. Not good that you pushed yourself to that, but good that you didn't try and push yourself further. So I do hope people acknowledge just how much of PaizoCon Online not just happened because of the network, but happened because of you, Paro.
Yeah, well, me and Peyton, Peyton was putting in the same hours I was putting into, because I would be up at ridiculous hours, and on Discord I would see him being active and doing his own things for the same reason. So, oh my gosh, Peyton was a superhero.
Now, Shadows Over Scotland in chat makes the generous offer of running you a slot 0, so a pre-con slot, but
way post-con.
Like, do you have the time before the con goes live to run a game? I would assume not.
No, I'm busier way before the con happens than I am after. It's the immediate aftermath when I get time. And like it actually didn't stop for me because I went straight from PaizoCon. Oh yeah, there's this roll for combat commitment, so I didn't really stop stream mode till yesterday.
Yeah, and we've got an adventurous on Friday. We had this episode planned, so
My normal
I
game
hope
day is
you have no
tomorrow,
plans to. Oh, your regular game day.
which may or may not happen. It may just be me saying, "Hey guys, let's do quest number 6 in Hero Quest tomorrow, and we'll be back to normal Pathfinder the week after."
Yeah, I hope you have no plans this weekend.
I don't think I do.
There we go. Because like you need. I know gaming is param time, but you need just some param time. You ready to talk about all the announcements we heard?
Oh my gosh, so many great announcements that I have to
All
pretend
right.
we heard.
All right, fine. I do have a little Starfinder stuff at the end here and then segue into news. Okay, I wasn't sure if we wanted to end on the Starfinder note or start with Starfinder and then go on to Pathfinder. No, let's go with Pathfinder first.
Mm-hmm.
And first thing I've got up are the adventure paths that were announced.
Oh, yes.
Starting in January 2021, we are getting back-to-back 3-part Pathfinder adventure paths. So Pathfinder adventure paths have all been 6 parts up to now, but Starfinder has experimented with the 3-part format where some of them start at first level, but not all of them, and you get 2 3-part ones in the usual 6 blocks that are 6-month block. Then you would get a 6-parter, and then you would go back to a 6-part one. So that is what Pathfinder is now doing for the first time, which I'm not surprised that Pathfinder is just doing 3-part adventure paths. I am surprised they didn't test it in first edition and that it's so soon into second edition that happened. But do you think that the game system would play a role in this experimental new format for adventure paths?
I think that I don't think the game system has any influence here. I think it does make it easier, but I think that's just a happy side effect. But it was received so massively positively with the Starfinder community. This idea of the 3-parters, not replacing the 6-parters, but sort of supplementing them. And there are just so many good reasons to do it this way. You have the idea that one of the things I do not like about the Adventure Path format, even though I love Adventure Paths completely, but there's a version of me who really loves D&D like I played back in the day, where you made a character and then they went on a series of adventures, and some were long-term and some were short-term. But when you make an Adventure Path character, you usually create a first-level character just for that Adventure Path, and the Adventure Path story is basically their entire character's career. Like, they're going to do this one thing in their lives, and this is kind of more realistic. Like, how often are you going to be dealing with something of this extreme magnitude in your life? You're not Saturday morning cartoon characters, but you could be. And with the Pathfinder Adventure Path, it's like, this is my character. They're entirely about the Wrath of the Righteous. This is my character. They're entirely about doing Iron Gods or whatever. But with a 3-parter, either you did something first or you did something after or both. Like, it's not your entire character's career, or it's also a very short commitment, like a shorter commitment, not very short. These things are still long. I mean, we're talking adventure paths here. So it's less intimidating to sign up for a 3-part. We're going to go from 1 to 10, or we're going to go from 7 to 14, instead of we're going to go from 1 to 20. And it's going to take 2.5 years, because that's my average length of doing an adventure path is 2.5 years, and I've done several at this point.
There's also the need, if you don't alternate between 3 and 6 parts, is that every single adventure path has to have a scope that can be small enough to start at first level and epic enough to go to 6th level and have the same pace and same number of major story beats. And there have been some adventure paths that kind of take a left turn about halfway through. Jade Region is one I think about, where it's like it's a 3-part adventure path about going across the Arctic, and a 3-part adventure path in Tian Sha that was just advertised as the Tian Sha adventure path. And so that first part really kind of dragged, and people were like, can't we just get to Tian Shaw stuff that's all over the set dressing and all over the advertising for this adventure path? So having 2-3-part adventure paths means you can have a different scope of adventure, such as the first one we've got is a mega dungeon called Abomination Vaults. And it is a 3-parter. It goes from level 1 to 10. It's 3 books, a 3-book dungeon crawl, which is cool because it's definitely feels bigger than any of the dungeon crawls we're used to, or most. But it's not so big. Like, it's not a 6-volume dungeon crawl.
Yeah. It's not.
That would have to be a super well written dungeon crawl to hold everyone's attention.
It's not Emerald Spire.
Right. And there's already an Emerald Spire, so having a different flavor of mega dungeon justifies having a 3-part dungeon.
You said nega dungeon. That would be so cool. A nega dungeon.
I wanted to say mega dungeon, but I am feeling what you're saying.
Yeah.
Like, that's how you do it as a 6-parter. You do 3 parts going through the dungeon. You get to the bottom, enter the plane of shadows, and now you have to get out.
Oh yeah, and the castle turns upside down, but it's only if you manage to like get the right ending and not accidentally kill Richter.
Who's Richter? I'm sure I should know this.
Castlevania reference.
Oh, I do not. I've never played a Castlevania all the way through.
Okay, you need to play this one so fantastically. You really do.
Which one?
Symphony of Night. Symphony of the Night.
Symphony of Night?
Yeah, that's like if you only ever play one Castlevania, it should be Symphony of the Night.
All right. I doubt I will, but will probably ask you several times over the next decade, which was the Castlevania that you recommended?
It's a 10-hour commitment.
That's it?
Yeah. It's an adventure game, or it's an action game, so it's not a huge investment.
Maybe someday I'll have 10 hours.
Convert it to some of the dungeon office says convert it to a Pathfinder campaign and run it. I don't need to, because Wes Snyder wrote this fantastic Vampire Hunter D adventure that is a Pathfinder adventure supplement, and that work's been done for us.
How big is that adventure?
It's like a 32 pager, so it's not super big.
Okay,
but it's got the flavor, it's got the feels.
Doesn't it also have like a hand with a mouth in it or something?
Yeah. D. Yeah, that's the character that has the hand with the mouth in it that eats graveyard soil.
There you go.
Yeah. Also, I say that it exists, but it's also like ridiculously hard to get, so maybe I shouldn't have.
Oh yeah, well, you've got it, don't you?
I do, but I can't. Like, our fan base isn't going to be able. Like, your average fan base isn't going to be able to go get a copy for like a $200 off eBay or something.
So some of the bullet points about Abomination Vaults. I don't know why I'm having trouble with that name. It has more sandbox sections than you might expect, with cool underground exploration opportunities. Which I'm surprised to hear, because I expect to make a dungeon to have a lot of sandbox sections.
I don't know. When I think of dungeon and sandbox, I don't think of those in the same context, really, because a dungeon is a whole lot of choices between A, B, C, and D, but it's still very defined choices. In fact, that's what makes dungeons so appealing and popular as adventures and set pieces for campaigns, is that it actually makes designing them and playing through them fairly simple, because at any given point, really, you can just view all dungeons as a conversation tree or a node choice or a flow chart. You're just going to a junction. You can go right, you can go left, you can tunnel through the wall, or you can stick your hand in that suspicious hole in the statue's mouth and see what happens. But they're very defined, limited amounts of choices usually. Whereas in a true sandbox games, it's really more like the game master trying to accommodate what the players come up with and their needs, and having various levels of prep available for it. But the choices that the players have is implied to be near endless, whereas it's the exact opposite with a dungeon, where the choices are, you have 3.
Did you play Emerald Spire?
Yeah, I played through Emerald Spire.
Okay, how much time did you spend in the city?
Not much.
Okay, because I think that we've spent more time in the city than in the Spire, in the Emerald Spire game that we got the second level of the dungeon. And we're finding a lot of little mini tasks that we can then do inside the spire, and I would call that a very well implemented sandbox, because we didn't have to do any of that.
Mm-hmm.
We could have just gone to resupply, left the city, not really explored any of the city, any of our personal connections to it. And so it's informing different paths that we would want to take and giving us rewards for taking them outside. Like, we're not railroaded, but it is giving us new objectives that are open-ended and optional.
I would just really classify those more as like a really fleshed out side content or side quests, because for me, in order for it to be a sandbox, it has to make the assumption that maybe we never go in that dungeon.
Okay. So I guess I'm basing it on my Kingmaker experience, where you are like, here's the entire area. If you don't explore the entire area, what are you even doing? And so you are free to explore in any order. And I found in the first book, if you didn't do a snake pattern, then you would get hints about things that are going on in other places that you'd already stumbled upon. And so it was a little bit more railroady of a sandbox than the experience I'm having with Emerald Spire right now.
Yeah, there's various levels of success that can be had there, but I do appreciate, like, it's really made me want to appreciate hex crawling, and we're going to talk about this as well. There were other adventures announced that take place in the same town as Abomination Vault. Like, there's like a group of adventures that all take place in the same town, and they support being interwoven, and one of them is a dedicated sandbox adventure. So the sandbox elements in this should be able to tie into that, and there's a version of this where those adventures happen simultaneously.
Hey, Sheppy's in chat. Hi, Sheppy.
Hello.
So the city you're talking about is Otari, which is on Sandstone Isle. And you must have some information about some stuff that I don't have, so make sure that you bring it up when it becomes when it comes up again.
Yeah, well, Kick the Table mentions it here. Yeah, the beginner box also takes place in Otari, and there's a follow-up standalone adventure that's going to be a one-off adventure, and the name of it escapes me at the moment, but it also takes place in Otari, and it's assumed it's standalone, that you can totally play it, but it also has built-in support for basically welcoming in people who have graduated from the beginner box, so that their characters can just seamlessly continue their adventuring. And then also this adventure path is also able to do that as well. So there's a version of this where you play the beginner box and you learn to play Pathfinder and you make your characters. And then after you finish the adventure box group of adventures, or beginner box adventures, you then walk out into a world in which you have a completely mapped out area to sandbox play in, and this really well developed mega dungeon that you can keep diving on into. And it's a potentially, I am jealous of the player group that gets to explore this opportunity to its fullest, because it will be one of, if it's executed correctly, it would be one of the most richest and fulfilling implementations of the fantasy of what an RPG should be like. When you're thinking about, oh, you can do anything and there's these cool dungeons, this is really going to be one of the first times that Pathfinder has tried to give you, oh, you can do anything, but also there's this big giant cool dungeon. Decide what you're going to do, decide the order you're going to do it in, and just sort of revel in your choices.
Now, Dungeon Novice is asking, and you kind of touched on this, is the adventure going to have transition steps? Or, wait. No, I believe he's talking about the beginner box. We'll get to the beginner box after we talk about some of the announcements, because that does get covered. So, yeah, cool. I missed the interconnection there, and I'm even happier than that the Abomination Vaults is a 3-part adventure, because if you're thinking this is the transition from the beginner box, it's much easier to say, here's 3 books. We can play through this adventure. Yeah, instead of saying here's 6 books and it's 1 adventure.
Dungeon Novice, they're asking if this is full rules right away. We will get to that, but the thing we do want to say is so that, because you keep asking and looks like the chat's interested, the beginner box is full rules all immediately.
So yeah, Paizo PR said it's simplistic full rules. So what it means is that options are limited. So there's only 4 classes. There's not 12 classes. But the fighter in the beginner box is the fighter in the core rulebook. It's not like a different version of the fighter to make it easier to understand.
Yeah.
You need to be able to understand second edition to play the beginner box, and the beginner box is teaching you second edition, not a version of second edition that you then move into the real second edition.
Right. And if there's one criticism I have for the Starfinder beginner box, it is that it also went down that path that the Pathfinder did. Pathfinder was very necessary because 3.x, we're getting in the rabbit hole. We'll cover this soon when we get to that section, but there's a lot to cover there, but also a lot of good news.
So there is this quote from Ron Lundin from the Discord, Ask Me Anything. And I'm just going to... Actually, I want to give credit to the people that compiled it. Oh, shoot, where is it? There's a compilation on... there's a Google Doc of all the news that came out at PaizoCon, and that made reporting on this much easier, because even though I was there for some of it, it was kind of... The information was otherwise scattered all over the place. So thank you to the people that did the work and put this together. And hopefully before the end of the episode, I'll be able to give them a proper credit. So there's a creepy abandoned lighthouse outside of town with these ruins around it. No one goes there because it's been taken over, but when the gaunt light starts to glow again, it means trouble for the town of Atari, and brave heroes must investigate. They find far more than they bargained for. The lighthouse is only the top of a sprawling dungeon complex called the Abomination Vaults, whose long-dead master is active again.
Dun, dun, dun. And that's actually written in there, so fantastically done, Ron Lundin. Then there's the next one.
Next one is Fists of the Ruby Phoenix, which I was gushing about at PaizoCon, because the Ruby Phoenix tournament is something that I connect with when I was a venture captain and when I was, a venture lieutenant. I was a venture officer. And it was the meta plot of the Pathfinder Society, the year of the Ruby Phoenix. And it was also, that was when I was really learning Pathfinder lore. So to me, the Ruby Phoenix is a bigger part of Pathfinder lore than it is for most people. And whenever the Haugen Tapestry gets mentioned, I'm like, oh, that's from the year of the Ruby Phoenix. And there was a 32-page module that came out for the Ruby Phoenix tournament in first edition, and it came out around the same time that the Ruby Phoenix was the meta plot, but the Ruby Phoenix doesn't happen during the Pathfinder Society year. So if you wanted to actually play it, there was a way, but I could never figure out how to get the story ones that take place before the Ruby Phoenix tournament, because half the year is before the tournament, half the year is after the tournament. And I could never figure out a way to get the levels right for characters to play through it as a campaign. And now I don't have to, because the Fists of Ruby Phoenix is a 3-part adventure path coming in April. It goes from levels 11 to 20, so you can take your Abomination Vaults characters and just continue with the next 3-part AP. And this one takes place in Tian Sha, which, like I was saying about the Jade Region, only half of Jade Region actually takes place in Tian Sha, and that was kind of confusing and let down. So the Ruby Phoenix tournament seems like it's making up for a lot of what was going on at that time. Like, a lot of potential is now being realized as this campaign, this like Mortal Kombat's just martial arts with magic tournament that's been talked about and has played some part in the setting is now getting really a full spotlight on it.
Yeah, and it's also a great example of what the 3-part AP makes possible that first edition struggled with. The reason that it's so hard to get a campaign set around the Ruby Phoenix is the concept of the Ruby Phoenix is these are the best fighters in the world, and it's hard to make a first level character campaign based on being the best fighter in the world without doing a 200 episode shonen arc, which, you know, most people don't have time to fit into their organized play schedules. So this starts at 10th level, and given how levels work in Pathfinder in the lower scale of levels that most of the power players have in the game, there's every bit of chance that you are in the upper percentage of powerful characters in all of Galarian if you are starting as an 11th level character.
Donato Classic. Luis is in chat, and he is giving credit to Vest of Holding for the Google Doc that I've been using that I've been drawing this information from.
Mm-hmm. I really am still inspired that there's still these community members all these years. They're stepping up to make things like this happen, and put together these wonderful resources. And a lot of it is making me feel nostalgic and miss some of my participation in efforts like that. But I am so glad that that is continuing, and the fan produced content is every bit as rich and varied and helpful as it always has been.
Speaking of Luis, he is the developer for the Lost Omens line, and we were told about Lost Omens Ancestries, or Lost Omens Ancestry Guide. I've actually heard it referred to as both, and I believe this is far enough along that that's got to be finalized. So I'm just going to double check on Paizo what name is being advertised, and why don't you tell people about the Ancestry Guide?
And also, if you're wondering why we might be confused about that, is like we were provided with some early things, and some of the names changed between when we got art and when we actually and the announcements were actually made. It is going to be part of the Lost Omens line. We're talking about a standard Lost Omens hardcover release. It's going to focus on non-core ancestries almost exclusively, and provide lots and lots of options for the other ancestries that were introduced in previous Lost Omens guide, as well as presenting a whole bunch of new ones. For those of you who have also fallen in love with the Shuni, not here because they were developed similarly at the same time and they didn't exist when this needed this, but they're absolutely stuff for Android, fetchlings, sprites, flesh warps, Kitsune, which made a lot of people happy. But the breakout star seems to be the Griggs.
Really? That's the breakout star?
That's the one everybody is like. I mean, like, you're a grasshopper pixie. That's cool. Just like off the bat. Plus, this is also going to be a early in the life of the campaign where PF2 is making different assumptions about the game by including ancestries and playable characters like this, because that's like, it's going to be near impossible to play a pixie without flight at level 1 being a thing, and the Grig is pictured flying on the cover. So I'm curious to see how having all these options so early on in the game's life changes how the meta of how Pathfinder 2 is organized and played. I know that in Starfinder, we've had to make this adaptation real early on because jetpacks exist immediately, and so flying around and using laser guns and cool robots and teleportation shields all happens right away there, and it did not make the adventures any less challenging or fun. So I would kind of love to see Pathfinder 2 have a life that is not simply walking down the exact same experiences that we've had in dozens of editions of this game and its predecessors before it.
There's also, we're seeing that the Advanced Player's Guide is already dealing with heritages, and the like the half-orc and the half-elf feel a little incomplete in the core rulebook. And I feel like the APG is really going to figure out, or is really going to introduce how to nail down those rules going forward. And then the Ancestry Guide is going to take what the APG is building up and explore that. And Luis in chat is also pointing out that Griggs are tiny.
Yeah.
You could play a tiny PC.
Yeah. And that helps, like, the rules for Pathfinder 2 help a lot there, because like the Starfinder rules, size matters as a part of the rule system, but it isn't so humongously important to the rule system that it completely locks out entire character concepts or forces the designers or your character to do acrobatic like contortions to get your character to work the way you want it to be. We've seen that with small characters, that they can absolutely be barbarians and be super successful in this edition without any of the hiccups that they had to face or challenge they had to overcome in previous edition of the games. And so tiny is definitely going to be interesting to see, because it means things like, in the past it meant things like being able to share spaces with bigger characters much earlier on, and what that means. Like, technically in first edition you would literally have to share a space with somebody to attack them as a tiny character without a reach weapon. and there was a very high chance that your weapon was going to be dealing 1d2 or 1d3 damage, no matter how big it was when you started this.
Now, there's mention of Flesh Warped, which somebody asked Luis about on our Facebook page, and he kindly answered that Flesh Warped is a catch-all ancestry for people that have been transformed by outside forces. This includes people who have been flesh warped, mutants of the mana wastes, and more.
Oh man, you all are going to continue with this body horror creepy stuff, aren't you? Man, it's just going to make me... It's well done. It's great. It's fantastic, good content. But it's still going to make me shiver and have nightmares every time I see the art that you all put together for this stuff.
We've also got what's called confirmed versatile heritages, rather.
Yes.
And that includes all of the Geniekin. Yeah. And so that is what I was talking about. I think the ASMR and the Tieflings and a few other entries in the Advanced Player's Guide are actually going to be versatile heritages and not ancestries on their own.
Mm-hmm. And I love the Geniekin. It's a much more flavorful version of the plain touched characters that we've seen in pre-Pathfinder versions of the game. And I was a big fan of the elemental plain touched characters because it made such fun backgrounds for possible character builds without having to be very complicated about what your ancestry and lineage was. It's just like far, 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 far in the family line. I had an adventurous bard uncle who found like the half earth elemental man of his dreams, and now the family line is totally filled with the occasional ability to throw rocks from your brain.
Param, I love having Luis in chat because he is confirming that Changelings, Dhampir, Aasimar, Duskwalker, and Tieflings are versatile heritages.
Dhampir's going to make a lot of people happy. I know that lots of people love their half vampires.
Dhampir. There was the Blood of the Night? No, what was the vampire and Dhampir focused book in first edition? Anyway, it was one of the Blood of. And I loved the expansion of the Dhampir as a concept, so that it included a lot of different interpretations of vampires from different cultures, and it really made the Dhampir a lot more exciting as a concept to me.
Yeah. Luis is also confirming that Dhampir leshies are indeed going to be a possibility, and there are some like vampiristic parasitic plants that exist in the world that are super creepy to think about as characters. I can just see like some, honestly, Pokemon has done a fantastic job of making art concepts for this sort of thing. So if you ever wanted to play some of the creepier plant Pokemon out there, now is your chance.
And Luis and the Dark Swordsman 13 both confirm it was Blood of the Night, was that book that I was talking about. I'm ready to talk about Bestiary 3.
No.
Okay. Oh, actually, I should also mention Lost Omens Ancestry Guide is coming out February 2021. Mm-hmm. Are you not ready to talk about Bestiary 3 because we have not reviewed Bestiary 2 yet?
That's kind of the deal. I mean, I'm glad that the Bestiary 3 exists and it's going to come out. It has one particular rule in it that is making me absolutely scream with joy because it was the one rule that made first edition such a joy to play through as a GM, and that is the concept that it is going to have the troop rules. When you want your party to feel like complete and totally awesome characters wading through seas of orcs and goblins and gnolls, or maybe there is wall-to-wall zombie and they have to get to the necromancer on the other side, troops make that so much more fun to deal with from a rules perspective than any other concept of the rules before it. And I love the minion rules that we've seen in Mutants and Masterminds, and then were later used in a lot of other games, including 4th edition D&D. Jason Bowman put together a fantastic set of minion rules with his third-party imprint that you could use for 1st edition if you're interested in that. And I really want to see a cool version of minion rules exist for PF2 as well, because it's such a great concept. But even minions, which are basically characters that die in one hit, no matter what happens. Basically, all you need to do is know that you dealt some amount of physical offense to that character or mental offense to take them off the field. so that you can have really interesting dynamic battles with lots and lots of characters to keep track of without having to do a massive amount of math or overwhelm the players with a difficulty they can't handle, while still presenting decent threats. Troops are like that, amplified. It's basically swarms of orc. Like, take orc. Orc swarm is a troop. So it uses the swarm rules adjusted so that they are more functional and less the game-changing party-killing option that they could have been in early first edition, especially. And
I'm surprised you keep going to orc, because when I think troops, I think this is a great way to show that this is a lawful, an organized group, and to differentiate it from orcs, which I would run more as a scattering of individual ones, just to give the encounter a different flavor.
I guess it's because the Thousand Orc was the book that made me inspired to try to figure out a way to make it happen, which was a Dritz de Erden Forgotten Realms novel that had one of the best pieces of promotional art that I've seen for a fantasy novel, where it was a picture of the cover, which was this gigantic battle scene covered in orcs and Dritz standing there doing his whirling dervish technique. But instead of the orcs being in the art, they had just their silhouettes and they were numbered, and then there was a list of the ways he was killing them. All the way down the side. A fantastic piece of art. And ever since I saw that piece of art, I was like, how do I make this playable in the game, where my players can go into literally a massive army of orcs and succeed? But you're right, I guess it would also apply if we called troops hordes or something like that. Maybe there's an alternate version of troop that could be a horde, and there's some potential for some fancy rules happening there. But you're right. Like it when they were introduced in the first edition of the game, it was for the Russian soldiers that appear in Reign of Winter, and they are very much a regimented rank and file troop that live up to the name. But it solves that rules question. You can handle a mass of bodies on the field as an actual threat to the PCs without being overwhelming, and still have these fantasy fulfilled of you going through a literal sea of offensive forces. And also the troop rules, I hope, become some sort of, when PF2 has its mass combat rules, I hope that they lean on troops as an inspiration or an ability to make that happen, because that will be a much more satisfying game to play when we can actually move individual units and we're not doing the civilization style army moves across a hex and then very quickly auto-resolves its combat situation.
Yeah, I much prefer troops to mass combat, because you are not losing the PC and all of that. They're not just a member of a chunk of people moving forward and fighting as one. You are fighting a group that's fighting as one, but that's because you outclass them so much as one awesome PC.
I love that Elf
With your
Tarot
friends.
is saying that a troop of troops would be a horde. And then Kick the Table is emphasizing exactly why they're necessary, because somebody grab me a soda. I need to roll 243 initiatives real quick.
So I just want to go through a couple of bullet points for Bestiary 3. First one is that it rounds out a lot of the big favorites that didn't get into the first two, which we're going to talk a lot about when we get to Bestiary 2. But I mean, Froghemoth has been covered, so I don't know what big favorites they could still be talking about.
Death Knight, I think, is one of them.
Oh, really? Death Knight hasn't made it yet? Okay.
And
I know the Yurthak is in there, but that is nobody's favorite.
Ironically, I don't know, because I don't know which deep cut this is. If this is from Pathfinder or from their D&D line, but the art on the cover for the Death Knight looks exactly like this mini I painted on stream a while back.
Nice. I like red for a Death Knight. That's a different take.
Yeah.
Bestiary 3 has an urban sub-theme, which surprised me, because Agents of Edgewatch is the super urban adventure path, and it's coming out July 2020. So after this adventure path is done, oh no, you know what? Now it's starting to come together. Stuff that was developed for that adventure path is showing up in the Bestiary after it. Of course.
That's usually how this works out, gang.
No further questions. March 2021 is when to expect Bestiary 3.
Oh, the Tooth Fairies are back.
The Tooth Fairies are back.
Oh,
Tooth Fairies mess me up. I've had a couple of characters lose teeth. So it is getting a little bit late. There were some deep dives into the APG and the beginner box. which I feel like we've got to at least acknowledge, but I don't think we should be going in everything that was revealed about the Advanced Player's Guide, because it was such a
No, this is
highlight
the
of the show.
episode.
We got so much information.
Yeah, so this is where I'm going to disagree with you, Ryan. Like, this is the episode people came in for us to have this conversation. They tuned in for this conversation, so we kind of need to do it.
All right. We learned a whole bunch of information about the Advanced Player's Guide, which is coming out still in July or August. It is still the Gen Con release, even though Gen Con has now become an online convention. We got a lot of information about the classes and a lot of the changes to expect from the playtest. We got a big preview of the archetypes. Sort of. We got the full list of archetypes, but very little actual information about what those archetypes are.
Oh, we got a lot, actually, individually. They kept throughout the stream, and then through later streams and in AMAs, they kept going, and this is this, and this is this, and this is this.
Yeah, that's fair. We learned about the ancestries. We learned a lot about how animal companions and different companions are going to play a major part in this book. Mm-hmm. Where do you want to start, Pam?
Let's start with the animal companions, because when we hit the archetypes, that's going to be the rest of the conversation. So animal companions are getting like full expansions on rules. If you're playing a class that has animal companions or familiars, there's lots of fun stuff and extra options that are going to exist for you in here. It also is going to include the witch class, which is the class that most depends on a familiar in the game, and it's going to have lots of rules there. It also is we're going to talk about archetypes. They're also introducing 2 archetypes specifically so that any character you want can have either a familiar or an animal companion or both by taking that archetype and adding it to your character. So if you wanted to play the Beastmaster, but that's like, Beastmaster is like 90% barbarian that also talks to critters, and that doesn't really map with any of the other classes super well, you can make your barbarian, and then you can throw on your animal companion archetype and get your cool menagerie of critters that way. That will be very effective and leveled up and not just be cannon fodder. If you are a rogue, or say you are a magical princess of power champion type character, because you too have watched She-Ra and loved it, you could make a champion character and then have your magical animal companion or your magical familiar anime sidekick character show up without having to become a pure spellcasting class to get access to one of those things. There are so many types of fantasy characters and archetypes that have been introduced well after these games were originally put together. We're talking well past the Appendix N era, especially as anime has become a much more prevalent influence in the hobby and has invented and evolved the fantasy tropes into lots of fun ways. This book is very much acknowledging those sorts of advancement in the storytelling and providing access to characters that just would not be very easily possible in previous editions or previous solutions for them.
What if I want an investigator with an alligator?
That is completely possible.
Yes.
But the problem is they're going to never be punctual. So they're going to have an initiative penalty.
Because you're going to see them later.
Right.
Because of the alligator.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the animal companions on the list that was mentioned that has me intrigued is a riding drake. Because like you were talking about, it seems like we are getting fly options being introduced to the game at earlier and earlier levels. Possibly level 1 with some of the new options in the APG and the Ancestry Guide.
Dragon riding is like a humongous concept of fantasy that has not been adequately addressed in first-party supplements for the games throughout its history, though there has been some fantastic third-party solutions in first edition. Like was it Wright Publishing or Rogue Genius that did the...
Rogue Genius did the Dragon Rider. Yeah, it's pretty cool
and
class.
Very, very well done for first edition. And so... I'm glad to see them talking about like more evolved, complicated, or maybe even more extra character concepts that are getting support like right off the bat with the APG. I really, really hope that one day I'm able to make a PFS character that comes swooping in on their own blue dragon and is able to just enjoy that moment before it gets killed in one hit because PFS is so hard sometimes.
And you must be happy about the spell slime.
Yeah, yes, I am. I mean, it's I love the spell slime, and it's never been. It's also one of the characters that very much wears its influence on its sleeve, and I am a humongous fan of both of the pieces of media that have influenced the creation of the spell slime, or as Mark Seifter said on stream, I'm not such a bad slime. I'm really oh man, it's oh my gosh, I love slimes. I love that media that has come up to make me love slimes even more. And now all I need to make me completely happy is to have those those Elysium sentient CR1 slime creatures playable in the game. If I can make a celestial slime monster as my PFS character, I don't know that I would play anything else. It might surpass my love of halflings.
Wow. I do not get it, but I'm happy for you. So we want to talk about the investigator?
Okay, sure. Investigator is a lot like its Pathfinder 1 class fantasy. It gets to do the studied combat. It is it's competing with the rogue as the best skill monkey in the game. What else do you want to go in about the investigator? It's the one that sort of is meeting its expectations probably the easiest. And if you knew what the investigator was in first edition, you got a pretty good idea what it's going to be like in second edition.
Yeah, in first edition, it was technically a hybrid class, but it was one of the hybrid classes that it's like, this feels like more than just a hybrid of two different classes. This is a fully realized concept that could have appeared in absolutely any hardcover book as a new class. And it's mostly been carried over. The idea that you have your methodologies, I think, was a really cool name for the picking your specialty of your class. And I believe it was Inspiration First Edition is now devising a stratagem, which again is a good technology for figuring out a way to make things to handle things smartly, because you are not physically capable, but man, can you analyze the situation.
Okay, we're having a little bit of net congestion right now, gang. So apologies for any of the stutter. It appears to be a struggle, not a blackout. We're just hoping that's gonna. I'm delaying the conversation about something important so that it can steady itself, and that delay is over. So please continue, Ryan.
All right, I'm ready to move on to the Oracle, which is the game that I got to play in that battle, the APG adventure that Luis ran us through, that Rob Lundeen wrote.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved the Oracle. I loved it in that playthrough. I think I finally got how to play second edition spellcasters, and that it actually does totally line up with my play style much more than first edition spellcasters ever did.
Mm-hmm.
And that the Oracle is more than just the sorcerer of clerics, that it really does emphasize the mystery, and that the way that you build your character around your mystery completely changes the feel and the play style of the class.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it does a better job of representing what the Oracle's concept should have been or could have been, better than the first edition Oracle even, because it makes that mystery and your relationship to these strange powers so much more impactful in what your character's actually doing throughout the combat. So this is one of the situations in where it's definitely fulfilling the expectations that you would have if you played a first edition Oracle, and doing it better.
The big change from the playtest was that the mysteries and the curses. The curses was something that you could call on to channel additional power, but with consequences, including the third strike was you just were unconscious, I believe, for 10 minutes, not even just for a minute or for the rest of combat.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people did not like that, and so it's become a little more nuanced and a little less punishing.
Mm-hmm.
And so people are more encouraged to actually consider pushing themselves to the limit.
Yeah, and it's a part of the game design where you have to the class fantasy of like pushing yourself to the limit that you literally, go out is fun in a storytelling point of view. But when you're talking about the meta of a cooperative game, and especially since the Oracle is very likely to be one of the primary support characters in the party, that taking rules that take them out of play, especially if you're like having a new player deal with a class that doesn't understand how humongous of a consequence that could be, is troublesome. You've especially if you think about like organized play or a new player playing an organized play, where if just they make the wrong decisions and suddenly your entire party does not have the healer in the middle of a combat or right before a big combat, it's a quick way to a TPK. And so at least this way, the consequences are still there, but they're less dire, and they mean that you will not be able to, because it's not just so much about the consequences to your character, but with a game like this, you making a wrong decision like that or falling into a character trap like this could very much mean a humongous detriment of fun for the entire player base that is at your table.
Next up, we've got the Swashbuckler, which is the more finesse focused combatant that you are supposed to be dex based, but you are still a frontline combatant.
I'm so happy with this class.
A lot of charisma to it and a lot of role playing. If I understand correctly, it almost uses panache like its own hero point system for being clever. Like, weren't there examples of getting panache just for having a good one-liner?
Yeah, exactly. And one of the new ones they introduced is like a way that you can guarantee that you can have panache as an ability that they're getting called After You, where you can just go, oh, no, you take the initiative. I'll wait. You get the first blow, and that guarantees you enter combat in panache. And I like the Swashbuckler in Second Edition is another class that is doing its class fantasy better than First Edition because it's not a hybrid class now. This was a class that was written from the ground up to be its fantasy. So panache is a state of being. Either you are on it or you have lost it. And those two states of being have mechanical impacts. You're constantly encouraged to play up the character like they're supposed to be, to take these extra risks, to be that little bit more impressive, because it means that it's a gameplay advantage to you and not just you hampering your character for no benefit.
Param, if I rolled up Xavier Sever, my adventurous character in Second Edition, I might make him a swashbuckler with the archer archetype.
I would be.
Wit is one of the styles, which is the archetype that I took, and it's full of humor, uses diplomacy to make banter, and enemy take a penalty. That's Xavier.
I would be disappointed if Swashbuckler did not make it into that character concept in some way.
It's just a matter of, do I completely give up the spell casting of being a bard, or would I take a bard archetype as well as the archer archetype? There's a lot to think about there, but the swashbuckler has made the list.
Yeah, or do you make like a bard that can do archer, but then you take the swashbuckler archetype?
I guess I'd have to see the archer archetype to see if it's even worth still considering, because for all I know, it might just be really boring or dumb. Might not be. I just don't know. We haven't seen anything other than the word archer on a list of archetypes. But before we get to the archetypes, the witch. How did the witch handle the transition from playtest?
It seems to have handled it very well, but with like the least amount of changes of all the classes. Like the witch kind of nailed it right away, so it's continuing to do very well. The patrons are having a much more pronounced effect on the rules and in your character options now. They're definitely amping that up. The familiar is going to definitely be much a bigger part of it. Much more original spell list available to you because of because now the book is actually this always happens with the playtests. Like this Starfinder had this as a big problem too when they were previewing the Witch Warper, where it's this really awesome, cool character concept, but we kind of had to use the core rulebook spell list because they could release the preview for the class and a few support spells, but they couldn't release what it really needed, which was the entirety of Calm's spell list. So the witch had to use a lot of what we already had in the preview, And it's definitely going to be benefited now that the APG is going to be able to give the witchy spells the spells they deserve.
They
Oh,
also opened it up to all four magical traditions, right? It was only three of the four in the
right, it's all
playtest,
four.
and
And it's based on your patron. Also, hex cantrips are a thing now, so you can go back to that first edition witch feel where there are just some powers that are always on for you.
yeah, a lot of witches were not spellcasters; they were just hex
Mm-hmm.
dealers. All right, are we ready to talk about the archetypes?
I think so. I think what real quick one thing we didn't mention was like this also is going to have a whole bunch of ancestries that were already previewed and talked about at depth coming into this conversation. So, yay, lots of cool stuff happening there. But really, the archetypes is where the news is for this book.
I'm just pulling up our higher res version of the picture
Mm-hmm.
with the list. Nope, I'm on the wrong picture. So, what are some of the archetypes you remember off the top of your head?
Okay, so the archetypes that exist in the APG, you have your multi-class archetypes that you're expecting for all the new classes so that you can dip into I want a very witchy fighter or I want a paladin oracle. I want, all that stuff is being supported. Absolutely. Also, the two archetypes that are coming in to support the familiars and the animal companions are coming in. So that if you are playing a class that does not have that feature and you very much want it, and you remember how much I really hyped the feat chains in first edition on the show that would let you add those to your character no matter what your class was, you can now do that in second edition. It's fantastic. Also, if you are a class that has those as options and you add these to your class, it supercharges your animal companions and or familiars. So you can make that an even stronger part of your character if you want to lean heavy in that direction using these methods. But the real thing that had us exciting was something that was sort of teased as a potential solution back all the way in the beta playtest to solve some of the siloing that we were worried that PF2 would be crippled by. And that is the role and combat style based archetypes that are finally adding that last little bit of customization that PF2 needed so that you can really make any character you can think of and actually have the rules to support it.
Also, the GMG introduced the idea of just giving characters a free archetype,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that that's just how I'm going to run every 2e game that I ever organize, because archetypes feel like they just are such a big part of customizing a character, and you will build your character concept more around the archetype than around your base class for a lot of these concepts. And it's almost then just becomes a feat tax to not get a free archetype. And every character can benefit from having an option like an archetype. It just makes every single class two things at once, or you can really focus on a single thing. So you just get a nicer suite of low level
Mm-hmm.
feats to choose from when you're trying to figure out who
Yeah.
you want your character to be.
Yeah. And they're great. We already mentioned that archer is one of them. Hey, if you want to play this class but you want to focus on ranged combat, and it's important here that the archer is actually all of the ranged weapons options here. It's not you could be a crossbow archer. And I imagine that these rules will be very useful when the gunslinger rules are introduced in the game down the line too. So if you want to be a ranged focus offense as part of your character class, you've got archer. The ones I was more excited about is the Sentinel and the Bastion. Also, the Bastion is just such a really, really cool name for a character. And the Bastion is adding shield focusing to your character. So you get all those cool shield feats and abilities, and even more so available to you, like the fighter got to enjoy. So if you want to, make a big, giant piece of metal an integral part of your character, this is a way to do it. And I hope they did not confirm this, but I hope that we can get our full Captain America on with this archetype and actually start throwing that thing. That would be fantastic. And the Sentinel is the same, but it's the armor focused. And that is super needed for two reasons. First, there needed to be a way to make much easier to add armor to a character concept without having to go down the general feat chain that gets you heavy armor eventually by level 8 or 12, depending on how you built it. And it ended up with a whole lot of people just becoming paladins all of a sudden for no good reason, or I guess champions all of a sudden for no good reason, and having to shoehorn that into their character concept, because that is one of the few classes that you do not want to shoehorn into a character concept if it's not compatible, because they come with a list of very heavy flavor focused themes that are tied into you being able to even do what your character abilities say you can do.
Yeah, you remember when I made that Hill Knight Signifer,
Uh-huh.
which just the prerequisites were you need heavy armor, some weapons, and spell casting. And it's like, well, that seems simple. Oh my goodness, is this difficult? I'm going to revisit that character just to see how, like, once the APG comes out, just to see how much easier these new archetypes make that character concept.
And ironically, it's so easy to become a Hell Knight Signifer if you start with literally Paladin.
I didn't want to. But no, it was also confusing because spellcasting was not a term in second edition. And so the abilities you get, the focus powers you got for the paladin, it wasn't clear if that qualified you for Signifer.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, this is retreaded ground.
Yeah.
I've got the list here: acrobat, archaeologist, archer, assassin, bastion, beastmaster, blessed one, bounty hunter, cavalier, celebrity, dandy, dragon disciple, dual weapon warrior, duelist, eldritch archer, familiar master, gladiator, herbalist, horizon walker, the investigator multiclass, linguist, lore master, martial artist, mauler, medic, pirate, poisoner, ritualist, scout, scroll trickster, scrounger, sentinel, shadow dancer, snare crafter, talisman dabbler, vigilante, Viking, weapon improviser, and then the other multi-class feats for the 4 classes that are being introduced. Most of these, the concept is super self-explanatory. It's a single word that is completely clear about, if I want to be this character, that is the option I want to take. There's a couple of them that are a little more obscure, but most of them, it's just like, I know what a pirate is. I know what a poisoner is. I know what a cavalier and a bounty hunter are.
Now, there is a couple I want to call out that that address more of the meta rules concerns. As a fan of spellcasters, I very much am aware that the current meta strategy for being a very good spellcaster in Pathfinder 2 is to be more than one. Like, it's, if you want to super invest in spellcasting in Pathfinder 2, one of the best ways to do that is to become multi-classed into another spellcasting class to give you even more spells per day, to extend your endurance, to give you some abilities that work really well with your current spellcasting class, and to basically, because cantrips are so useful and powerful in second edition, when you're able to like almost literally double the amount of cantrips you can have at your fingertips at any given time, that's also incredibly powerful. And if I had to guess, I would think that from what I've heard of the Scroll Trickster is a way to sort of address that concern for players that want to play very dedicated spellcasters but don't want to mix their peanut butter and chocolate together. It's the way they described it is it's a class that lets you go into scrolls and get a number of pre-prepped scrolls per day for free, and to do other things that has to do with like preparing spells in advance and basically extending your repertoire and depth of magical options for your character. And it appears to be a way to address what has become a meta solution by basically giving you a class that gives you what you're trying to solve by doing that, without forcing you to do, like we were talking about the paladin, to also adopt the trappings of another class that wasn't part of your concept. Yeah, it's a lot like a Scroll Alchemist Kick the Table. And Kick the Table has a cool quote I need to come back to in a minute because it was brilliant. But I will come back to it in just a minute. The idea is that by having these, if you've heard me talk about how the best wizard that you can play in Pathfinder First Edition or 3.x has a massive utility belt full of scrolls. This is a archetype that will allow you to do that concept, and it will also just be an archetype that will allow you to have a whole bunch of extra casts so that you don't feel like you're running out of juice in the middle of the day, which is something that happens if you are a pure spellcaster in PF2, especially at low levels, and you haven't done something to augment your abilities there. You either end up leaning way too heavy on your cantrips because you only have 3 casts at your highest level in PF2 by default, or you end up having to do other workarounds, or you do what happens in Starfinder, where it's actually very easy for a spellcasting class to pick up threatening and meaningful mundane offensive abilities, either melee or ranged in this edition. So I've seen a whole lot of wizards that are wizards most of the time and dang good with a crossbow the rest of the time.
A little more logistic stuff to point out. Most of these archetypes get a single page. Some of them get 2 pages. So I am interested to see if that's because some of them have more complex base powers or just a wider variety of options. Something like the Dragon Disciple and the Beastmaster are some of the ones that get 2 pages. I can definitely see a lot more having to go into explaining what the base ability of these concepts are.
Vigilante is also one they announced as an archetype, and that's a very good example of a concept that in first edition we said this probably should have been if there was just a way to write an archetype that works for every class, that's all they needed to do for this thing, because it works better as an archetype than it does a main class. And
the more I thought about the Vigilante in first edition, the angrier I got about it, because it was cutting me off from a lot of cool abilities that I'd like as feats for other characters that didn't have to be a Vigilante exclusive. And the Vigilante's main gimmick of the secret identity was really not great. And so had it been something like, I think in second edition as a universal archetype where it's just like a focus on the changing identity and a focus on being 2 people at once, that is how the Vigilante will be best presented, because then it's a lot more like, this is exactly what I want to do with this character. Not, I like these cool fighting styles, I'm also stuck having a secret identity.
Yeah, and it's also something that they seem to recognize even as they published it, because it was one of those new classes like the Gunslinger that got introduced to the game and also came alongside in humongous amount of class archetypes that were basically just, you want to be a wizard but also be a vigilante, you want to be a barbarian but also be a vigilante, you want to be a tiny magical girl that summons magical beast friends but also a vigilante. Yeah, it seems like they were just limited in the scope of what first edition's framework was to keep that from happening, and then they tried this, and they introduced a lot of ways to try to solve that by rigging the system with 1,000 archetypes when it really could have just been 1.
Yeah. Yeah. Because also in War for the Crown right now, we all just want secret identities, but there's no real rules for it unless we all really committed to these secret identities.
Mm-hmm. And Glanville's secret identity is also Glanville, but even more suave.
No, but there was another secret identity. You had some kind of cool alter ego name.
The Midnight Owl.
Was that it? The Midnight Hour?
Owl.
It's a great name. Owl. Okay. Anything else you wanted to talk about in the Advanced Player's Guide?
So much, but we got to move on.
Yeah, and one day we will be reviewing this book. In fact, one day fairly soon. July is not that far off.
I know.
It's June. Wow, it's even closer than I was thinking when I started that sentence.
I mean, this is a book that I'm eagerly hoping for my review copy as soon as possible.
The beginner box, is there anything else you wanted to follow up on those thoughts you were talking about earlier?
I just want to emphasize again that the beginner's box this time is going to be absolutely normal Pathfinder. The options are going to be pruned back a bit so that, there's not as many feats available for each of the classes. Not all the classes are going to be available, just to keep from overloading you so that it doesn't need to be just the 600-page book shoved into a box. It has all the toys that you're used to. But when you learn this game, you don't then have to come back and learn an entirely different, slightly more complicated version of the game later. You are actually learning how to play Pathfinder 2. And so you're just going to be able to transition from that same character without redoing their stats straight into a Pathfinder game or straight into a Pathfinder Society game.
I am so happy with this new beginner box because the core rulebook still frustrates me in a lot of ways. The beginner box comes with dice. It comes with rules to play the game and rules to teach the game.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're getting a single beginner box, you are suddenly have the tools to introduce Pathfinder to more and more players. And that is not something the core rulebook is good for.
Yeah.
There will be reasons to pick up the core rulebook after you get the beginner box, but the beginner box can last you as your Pathfinder tool for a long time.
Yeah, and when this comes out, I'm going to totally work with my local game store again to reinstitute the beginner box scholarship so that they can identify people that want to possibly get into the game and just hand them an adventure box. And
yeah, that's awesome. Should we address Pathfinder Society? It's 11 o'clock is why I'm asking, because
we'll go.
You know what? The list isn't that long yet. Left. You got half an hour in you?
Sure.
All right. Pathfinder Society, Year of the Open Road, which is the current season, concludes with Pathfinder Society Special number 2-000, The King of Thorns. It's by Kate Baker and Dennis Muldoon, and it is second edition's first multi-table interactive special. So that on its own, fun news, not a whole lot to talk about. Multi-table specials are awesome. Kate Baker's awesome. Dennis Muldoon. I feel like I should know that name, but I can't think of anything I know them for off the top of my head. All right. So I don't know when I will ever get a chance to play this, but it's always it is just good to nice. It is nice to know that there is an interactive special coming out for second edition. When that ends, we get the Year of Corruption's Reach, which is a terrifying name for a season. It definitely changes the tone from the Year of the Open Road very quickly. And it kicks off at Gen Con Online, which is still kicking off July 30th and runs until August 2nd.
I am happy.
It is about Iboria. Are you familiar with that region?
Yeah, that's a fun area that's up near Lands of the Leonard Kings and all that area. It's a fantastically weird and crazy place to adventure. But the other thing I want to address with the upcoming season is the changes to the quests, because oh my gosh, that is so much more important than the theme. Theme's great. Adventure new season, awesome. No downplay there. The new quests, you know, that they've been releasing as like one-offs instead of being tied into groups, which is good in a lot of ways. Also, I kind of miss that they were tied into groups, though, because they did some fantastic work with those previous first edition quests that made them so fun to play through in a single session. But the new quest is going to be the bounties, and they're all going to be evergreens. So there's going to be 12 of them. So there's going to be enough of an evergreen to take you a full character level if you need to. And because of that, you're always going to have these options. They're designed specifically so that you could play it on a lunch break at your office or at your school. And there's not going to need to be a complicated setup because the concept is going to be the same. There's a bounty board in the Pathfinder offices with people that people that need to be taken care of in some fashion, apprehended, eliminated, whatever. I hope that this expands to, this is just something that isn't people related, like we've got a bounty on solving this problem or whatever. But the idea is that you're going into the actual play experience with everything set up for you so that you can just get to the actual action and solving it without having to go through the talking to the venture captain, getting my note, and that part of it, which is a fantastically fun part of a Pathfinder Society session when you have 4 to 5 hours to spend on it. When I have my lunch break and I also need to eat these bag of chicken nuggets beside me while we're doing it, because this is also my lunch break, I want to get straight into the cool puzzle in the dungeon room and the fun combat as fast as possible.
And there are actual bounty handouts, right? Like you could put up your own poster board of the bounties.
Those aren't guaranteed yet, but they're obvious. And they said that seems to be a great idea. Wink, wink. I have every intention of setting up a bounty board, if an actual bounty board in our gaming communities around here, if that does come to pass.
Yeah, that's when you said that you wanted to talk about the changes to the quests, I was like, oh yeah, there was changes to the quest. What was it? And as soon as you said bounties, it all came back at just how excited that concept was and how much just tighter and how much smoother that will be to implement.
Kick the Table
So
says if they don't, the community will, and I'm going to double down on that. If they don't, I will.
There you go. All right, so it is getting late, so we will skip the Starfinder news, but Pathfinder Beyond is No Direction Beyond is going to be next week, covering all the Pathfinder news that was announced at PaizoCon Online 2020. And Alex and V, both co-hosts, were two of the co-hosts for Beyond, were there firsthand with the wrangling and the tech setup, so they heard the announcements. I'm sure they are very excited to start getting into that stuff. I know that there is a lot of stuff from the Starship Operations Manual.
Yeah,
is that the name of the?
Yep, we're finally going to be able to play our X-wing squadrons now,
And Voltron.
Freaking never expected Voltron, but sure.
Kick the Table is saying to remind me about that YouTube channel. We're not quite there yet.
Oh, I do have to give Kick the Table's quote because I missed it when we moved away from the archetypes.
Yes.
He says. He proposed the concept of the investigator barbarian because missing clues make them angry.
And sorry, I've got that YouTube channel queued up. Last two bits of news on my list are actually hardly news at all. One of them is that Geek Native has collected and updated their timeline of Paizo releases. And just the major news here is that there was some speculation that since the Advanced Player's Guide doesn't have to come out at Gen Con, maybe it won't, but it is still slated for July 30th / August 2nd. So that's the main thing to keep in mind, as well as Pathfinder Lost Omens Legends is also coming out at Gen Con.
Paizo PR.
And the Starship Operations Manual.
Paizo PR even chimes in that says, I feel the bounty image could be from the marketing budget if needed, LOL. It's such a humongous, obvious thing that will add 1,000% quality to this and will be a humongous boon for promoting the society. It just needs to happen. It needs to happen in some way. Somebody needs to make this awesome. And oh my gosh, if I can do it, if I can get my craftiness, get my freaking scroll saw out and start distressing some wood and getting some cool signage up and some chains and some like old seal. I'm going to make this look like in character. Heck, this is the tavern. I'm going to put one up here in the tavern. Absolutely. That's got to happen. Like a quest board that you would see in like your typical adventurer's tavern. And oh man, it's going to be in the background of our shots when we're doing podcasts, and my group's going to get to use it. And if I can get one in our local gaming community hubs, this needs to happen. This needs to happen.
Make it happen.
I will.
The last bit of news I had on the list was the PaizoCon AMAs have been collected in a Google Doc, which we've already talked about. And so, Aaron, we made it to the end of the episode. Are you ready for some wrap-ups and shout-outs?
I am absolutely ready for wrap-ups and shout-outs.
Wrap-ups and shout-outs right after this.
Wrap-ups and shout-outs. Wrap-ups and shout-outs. Wrap-ups. Wrap-ups and shout-outs.
And we're back.
Wrap-ups and shout-outs.
Yes, they got to enjoy that.
Well, thank you for joining us for episode 228 of No Direction, the No Direction Network's Pathfinder News Reviews and Interviews podcast. Before we go, we want to bring your attention to some cool things that you might be interested in as a fan of Pathfinder, a fan of us, a fan of cool things. Starting off with a book was recently announced by Legendary Games. It's Legendary Recipes, Cozy Cooking in the Time of Corona. This is a cookbook with recipes collected from various members of the Pathfinder or various members of the RPG community. They were collected by Anthony Adam, and I contributed to this cookbook because the idea is super cool, that it is a cookbook of simple recipes with minimal ingredients for people that might have limited access to groceries during the Corona lockdown. that's happening all over the world. So depending on the country you're in, it might still be more of a severe lockdown than it is in the United States and Canada, which have started easing things up. Yeah, so I really loved the idea. The Legendary Games has found some charities that they will be donating all profits towards. It really was just a fun project that was put together really quickly, and a lot of people were really happy to contribute. There's a lot of names of people that you may recognize as past guests in the Direction Network. Check it out on Drive-Thru RPG. So again, it's from Legendary Games. It's legendary recipes, cozy cooking in the time of Corona. I contributed my oven pancake, which is a pan bake, which is cool because you can just pour the batter on top of all kinds of stuffing to make it a ham and cheese pancake or an asparagus pancake or a shrimp and bechamel sauce pancake.
Tasty.
I know. They are all tasty. I got that last one from a crepe party I once went to, and I was accused of being really pretentious for having gone to a crepe party, but that's just being in Quebec.
Yeah. I want to give a shout out to something else tasty, which we shouted out to before, but I want to give my personal shout out to it this time. And that's to Critical Hit Cookies, because after we talked about them in the last few episodes, I ordered 6 dozen cookies, and they came literally the day of PaizoCon. And so that could not have come at a better time when I needed something that I could keep in a pile to keep my sugar up through these humongously long 9-hour recording sessions. Oh my gosh, they are so tasty, and they're cheap. I'm going to order another 6 dozen. Which
ones did you order?
I ordered, oh gosh, if I can remember, Her So Good Chocolate, which is a billion chocolate chip cookie, but also a little bit of spice added to it to give it that extra little kick of flavor. It's something you're going to want to drink nearby when you eat, but you're not going to need to like guzzle milk. If that's the thing, like it's going to have it's like if you ate a really good cinnamon candy and that heat you get afterwards, you're going to get a similar level of heat. It's very good, but it adds something to the flavor. But as long as you've got like a drink of water to have shortly after, it's not going to be a negative experience. I got the chocolate raspberry, which is one of my absolute favorites. It's decadent dark chocolate built into a moist and well put together cookie form with fresh raspberry chunks inside of it that blends perfectly with the salt that they add very lightly to the cookie, so that the sweet and savory tastes mix together in your mouth and is a satisfying, enjoyable experience. I got the Blondie stacked brownies. I got the turtle brownies. I got the...
Ooh, how are they?
Absolutely tasty and wonderful. They were my favorite, and they disappeared first. And I kind of forget everything else I got because I got so many different cookies. And I'm going to go back. Like I'm ordering another 6 dozen probably as soon as I turn this podcast off. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, like it's like $15 a dozen, and that's it. And so it was like absolutely. And these are like humongous gourmet bakery style cookies that I'm used to paying like $4 or $5 a piece for. So this is a no-brainer for me.
So when I ordered, I got a dozen snickerdoodles, and they are the highlight of my order. They're the least interesting of the 4 things that I ordered, and yet my favorite of the batch. There's the triple chocolate blondies, which I was expecting a little more sweetness there. That's probably the only one that I am struggling to finish off the whole set. It's like when I come and I've got the 4 choices, that's the one I'm least likely to take, and it definitely dries my mouth out. So like you were saying about needing a cup of milk, or I'll usually drink it with tea. They're fine, but they're my least favorite. The strawberry white chocolate blondies are fun though. Ooh. That's there's a freshness that the more chocolate based ones don't have that the strawberries add, and white chocolate complements the strawberries very well. And then there's the chocolate caramel pretzel cookies, which is way too much for Tina, and none of the girls like, but I like it a lot because I have an ignorant palate that just likes a lot going on, and there is a lot going on here. There's the crunch, there's the caramel, there's the saltiness, the chocolateness. It's a very crumbly cookie, so eat it with a hand under your mouth, but I'm enjoying those quite a bit.
Oh, the mocha chocolate chip cookie was one of the other ones I got. And the reason I forgot to mention it is because it disappeared immediately because it was so tasty. That was definitely the family favorite of the bunch right away. And again, I need to emphasize these are big cookies. These are you're not going to usually need a second cookie, but they are soft and they are a little bit crumbly. So these are not dipping cookies. These are cookies that they're moist enough they don't need the milk. But I wouldn't recommend milk with these cookies. Usually if I need milk with my cookie, it's either because the cookie was designed for milk in the first place, or the milk is making up for the fact that somebody did this cookie wrong.
Whereas I will almost always eat my cookies with tea, just because hot beverage and a cookie, it's a great combination. Next thing I want to shout out to Luis Loza, who's probably still in chat somewhere. He posted an unofficial Lost Omens survey, and a lot of it is questions about what people liked from the campaign setting and companions line in first edition, and what regions of the campaign setting you would like to see explored in future Lost Omens. It is unofficial. It is just Luis doing an informal survey to see what might be of interest for him to pitch for future products or just his own edification. So you can track that down. We've got a link in our Discord. I will put it in chat right now. It's actually a link to the link. I don't know why I went with the Twitter post about it instead of a direct quote. And I just see that a lot of people in chat are now very hungry for cookies, and Roll for Combat is telling us to stop talking about cookies. We will talk about cookies if we want to talk about cookies.
Steven, go get cookies. Go get cookies now. I was eating those cookies while I was playing with you.
Actually, since we've got Steven in chat, Darren Caldemeyer is wondering if RPG Superstar was mentioned. Param, you were involved in that. I believe there's still a week for people to submit their monster.
Mm-hmm. I don't know, so I'm not going to say or not because PaizoCon was all-consuming. I lived the PaizoCon. Yep. I breathed the PaizoCon. I worshiped the PaizoCon, and now it's over.
I figured by now Stephen would have answered that question. And here we go. There's the contest timeline. Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. So contest timeline is that the submissions end June 12th. So yeah, in about a week. So if you are interested in entering RPG Superstar and getting your monster added to a cool compilation that is being put out by Roll for Combat and being judged on by several members of the No Direction Network, check it out at rpgsuperstar.com.
And speaking of contests in the No Direction Network, we also should shout out to the Battle for the Gods contest that has entered its final rounds. I don't know the details if voting is up for that yet or not.
Just checking the blog because today was one of the potential launch days for the blog about it.
Yeah,
but I do not think I saw it on the Paizo blog.
Mm-hmm. So we've done the. It's too late to submit, but the voting will be soon. A lot of really awesome pantheons were submitted. Us over here at KD did our initial pruning. We sent the list of our finalists to Paizo, and they did some of their very necessary pruning for various reasons that, they would need to, like, this doesn't work because of this reason, or, hey, we would love to do this, but we can't because we have this other thing in an upcoming book that would, like, compete with its space, or, various reasons that Paizo would need to make those lists not one of the options. But now that that's been done, and the finalists have been selected, voting will start soon, where we will be able to vote on which of these pantheons is the best of the best and will win these Battle of the Gods, and then it will become an official pantheon for use in Pathfinder Society and an official part of Pathfinder canon.
Yeah, to tip my hat a little bit, or to tip my hand a little bit, in Luis's survey, one of the areas that I said could be explored more was pantheons, because that was something that I found more intriguing than satisfying with the amount that we got in the Gods and Magic.
Yeah. And honestly, helping judge this contest just continued to enforce how really rich this concept is and how underutilized it is. There's so much fantasy fiction and historical precedents for this sort of thing to exist, and it's criminal that there isn't more rule support for it. And the design team really hit on gold with this concept, and it's one of those areas that I think are kind of like Skittermanders or other rules concepts like Troops, where they hit on something not knowing that it was going to blow up, or only realizing it was going to blow up after the fact, and it has become so much more than it could have been. So this is a first great step in that direction, and I hope I see so many more pantheons become options, because I am so much more interested in cool philosophies and pantheons for defining what a religious character is like in my game than just another god for them to follow.
Yeah, Kick the Table makes the point that it's weird that most characters are monotheistic in a world with demonstrable pantheon. But yeah, like most religions that have multiple gods in there, you worship all of them, or you worship multiple. Like you worship the religion of multiple gods. You don't just say like lots of gods and only one of them is my favorite.
Yeah, and honestly, in every version of the Inner Sea Guide that has been written, it says that explicitly when they start talking about religion. It's like, there's lots of gods out there. We know they exist because we have absolute demonstrable proof they exist. So most people do not worship a single god. They worship all the gods as necessary and venerate them when appropriate. Like you might even, say a prayer to an evil god if you're about to do something that you want them to not get onto you about. Like, hey, Nobuger, I really know I should have totally murdered this dude, but please maybe not. Or I know I'm usually this goody two shoes hero person, but that tyrant that is turning people into half hobgoblins really needs a murdering right now. And Nurburger, you're the expert here. Give me a hand.
Both of your examples were murder.
Well, I wanted to focus on the same god.
Okay. I have several more shout-outs, so let me get through them. Wayfinder number 20 came out at PaizoCon. It is a Starfinder issue because second edition was still fairly new when the call for submissions came out, and so they decided to just go 100% into Starfinder for this one. And Wayfinder is Tim Nightingale's baby. It's something we've been talking about for years, and every PaizoCon you will hear it mentioned in several panels because it is a great way to get published, to get your name out there, to get the practice, because they have very professional standards for what they expect from their writers. And it's still a better opportunity than most other ways to get actual publishing credit in the RPG industry. So Wayfinder is out. Support Wayfinder. Wayfinder is awesome. Tim is awesome. Number 20 is out.
It's also free, so you got nothing to lose. Actually, the only thing you'll lose out is if you don't go get it.
I've tried to download it twice, and there's something about my computer it doesn't like. So I'm going to have to, I don't know, figure that out.
We will find a solution. I will get you a Wayfinder issue somehow, I'm sure.
I'll find a way. Yeah. The YouTube channel that I wanted to shout out to, it's the channel's weird, but the name of the show is A Toy Store Near You. And it is by the same documentary team that made The Toys That Made Us for Netflix. This one is straight to YouTube. And the thing is, it feels like it started out as just profiles of cool toy stores. And if you've ever been to an adult toy store, a lot of them are super cool, like more so than comic shops and game shops. Like the way you can use the product to decorate the store and make it feel like you are walking into a museum that you can buy things at, they're usually a treat. But this documentary started being filmed right around lockdown, right around quarantine. And so most of this is actually about these toy stores are struggling to deal with that, and how they are, they're trying to keep their employees. They are trying to raise awareness and figure out ways they can still make money without breaking the law. And also going into the history of the store to really make it sympathetic. They get interviews with the employees, talk about who they are, talk with some of their featured customers. It's a really cool documentary, and out of necessity, it became a more emotional and a heavier documentary than I think they originally intended for it to be. And so just as a human interest story, it became really interesting. Plus, you get to see a lot of cool pictures of toys.
Man, this is going to hit really, really close to home for me because of several reasons, both my background and the fact that right now I've been helping one of my former co-managers of the game store, as they have left the game store into the professional world and then realized the call to the game store has brought them back. They started up their own game store sort of as a side hustle, mostly online at first, and it ended up making them more money than their professional hospital job.
Wow.
Full-time hospital job. And so they have now switched to being full-time game store owner again. And that's because it's Entertainment Castle. Nathan Varney is my friend who runs it. And there is few people in the entire world who knows how the business of running a hobby-focused store works than Nathan Varney. And if you are a professional or interested in becoming a game store owner or a comic store owner or any sort of hobby store owner, this is a man that you probably should reach out and have a chat with, like up to like the same level of insight and knowledge and experience that you would see at like what's the website I'm blanking on here that gives all that cool game store advice that's industry focused only.
ICV2.
Yes, ICV2. But like he's like living, breathing ICV2. And I've been chatting with him as he's been getting this and helping him and seeing him grow this tiny business. And then COVID hits, and so this is a story I'm intimately familiar with. And this documentary, I'm curious to see how others have gone through it. Something that I have very much gotten through myself recently.
So I'm going to use that instead of doing a shout out to a podcast as I've been doing lately. I'm just going to say that YouTube channel is the equivalent of one of my podcast shout outs, so that we can get to the PaizoCon Online 2020 seminar coverage. Mm-hmm. This is an annual tradition, and one of the main reasons we were doing the PaizoCon coverage was so that we can also have these recordings, get them out to you as soon as possible. And Vanessa Hoskins has been doing the editing on these. She's been putting them together, and starting tomorrow. Yes. Starting tomorrow is what we had agreed on. You will get the Welcome to PaizoCon panel, and then you will get each of the Paizo seminars, the Paizo, the ones that were recorded over Twitch. Those will be coming one at a time in chronological order, and we are still working out where we're going to fit in the ones that were not hosted by Paizo. Mm-hmm. We're definitely going to get out there the ones that we have. I just need to figure out how to fit it on schedule. We'll probably double up some days because there really is only like a dozen seminars this year, mm-hmm. which is compared to the usual 40 or 50 seminars. It feels like this is going to be done before Gen Con, which is unheard of when it comes to PaizoCon coverage.
Yeah. Usually like we're really straighten it like, oh, Gen Con's about to happen. I'm packing. I'm getting my car ready. Oh, by the way, we still have 4 more things that need to hit the feed. Oh, I have one last shout out. And this is a shout out to a tip that I learned, one from you, Ryan, that I don't know that you gave me the tip immediately or not, or realized you did when you did. And a related tip from Midwinter Minis, which is a hobby mini focused YouTube channel that is fantastic. And if you're a beginner, you need to check them out. Their Blackstone Fortress tutorial is like one of the best beginner painting series I've ever seen. But one of the tips that they've recently had in one of their newer videos is using metallic Sharpies as your base coat for metallics on your miniatures, especially for trim, because it is infinitely easier to control the metallic Sharpies than it is to control metallic paint, which is always a problematic paint to work with. There's very few good metallic paint options out there. Reaper, one of my favorite brands ever, is notorious for also having one of the worst metallics available in the market. But that's okay, because GW's metallics also terrible. Like Vallejo's metallics are probably the best in the industry right now, but even then you're still dealing with an imprecise medium. Oh gosh, that's a pun that I didn't intend to make.
I don't even... Where was the pun?
An imprecise medium. The paint medium is the problem with the metallics. It becomes runny and hard to work with because it's imprecise.
Okay.
It goes where you don't mean to take it, and it's the medium that makes it go where you don't want it to go. So it's an imprecise medium. But the paint, if you just grab a set of metallic Sharpies and just run that over top of what your mini, and it will do a perfect base coat, seamless, brushless, awesome. And then you just do a wash over top of that, and it's some of the best looking metallics I've ever done. Why are you giving me a funny look?
I am not giving you a funny look. I'm just listening.
Okay. So that's part one of the tip. And the part that came from Ryan is the extra fine tip Sharpie for eyeballs is an amazing game changer. And so I've now changed how I'm doing it. I have ordered an entire kit of extra fine tooth Sharpies in all the different colors that I like to paint eyeballs. And my new process is white patch over the eye, Sharpie comes in, clean up with flesh. Instead of the other thing, which was white patch over the eye, vertical line with very tiny brush that I have to paint half a dozen times to get it right, and then clean up with flesh. I was able to paint this person's eyes, which you can't see because camera and stream, but this is a mini I painted during my lunch break. It took me 15 minutes total to paint this mini from bare primer, and that includes, you can't see it, but getting the eyeballs right using the Sharpie technique and the layer lines with my custom paints. And like this mini was a bare plastic mini 15 minutes before it became finished.
So what's interesting is that when I was in high school, I did use metallic Sharpies as the silver highlight when I was painting miniatures. And I have not thought about that since high school. So I knew that couldn't have been the tip you got from me. But I don't use Sharpies for my eyeballs. So how did I give you that tip?
I thought you said that you got that tip from Luis, and I was like, holy crap, that's a perfect solution for this. I know
it's possible that, yeah.
I know it was a conversation I had with you. I could have misheard you say something and then thought you gave me an awesome tip. But either way, thank you for giving me an awesome tip that you may not have actually given me. Because it has, I have managed to get eyes on all of my soldiers, even the ones that were 10-minute speed paints. My entire army has stilly gazes now. And also my entire little sister's army has stilly gazes now. Because I had to practice.
Sounds like
so
it was a fine tip.
Oh!
Haha! We're going to be back in 2 weeks with episode 229. It is the Bestiary 2 and the Bestiary cards feature with Logan Bonner. So we're going to be talking about Bestiary 2 in the same way that we talked about the Game Mastery Guide a few months ago with Mark Seifter, where we, bring any of our issues with the book to the person that was the lead developer on it, or the lead designer in this case. So I'm looking forward to that because I got Bestiary 2 in the middle of PaizoCon, and I've been flipping through it since, and I used the Bestiary battle cards at that game that we ran after PaizoCon, and playing with those cards was one of the highlights of that game. So I'm looking forward to talking about those.
Yep.
Until next time. Oh, Per, did you have a thought?
No, I was just agreeing with you. Those cards are awesome.
All right. Until next time, I'm Ryan Costello.
I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param.
And if you want to find the path, you need no direction.